Chapter 14:14. In the hall of the thatched hut, Ming Hui's eyes flickered, and he calmed down after a long time. Elder Ming, since you are that person, how did you become like this? Nie Tian couldn't help but ask curiously when he saw that Ming Hui had calmed down a lot. From the former demon dragon king to the current skinny old man, the change in form was so great that Nie Tian couldn't understand it. Alas! Ming Hui let out a long sigh and said, I was the king of the demon dragon clan, but I was obsessed with demonic fire. In order to merge with the boundary of the universe, I abandoned my dragon body and occupied the body of a human. Although I succeeded in merging with the boundary of the universe, the demon dragon clan was destroyed. And because I had already forged a human body, I was spared from the disaster. And Xianlong found me, but he didn't kill me. Instead, he let me go. Nie Tian listened to Ming Hui's words and frowned even more. Ming Hui was indeed unqualified to be the demon dragon king. His own clansmen were annihilated, but he even abandoned his dragon body and lived on alone. Ming Hui must have lived a painful life for hundreds of thousands of years. Otherwise, he wouldn't have changed his name to Ming Hui. If the heavens gave him another chance, he would definitely not merge with the boundary of the universe. He would fight to the death with his clan. Even if he died in the end, it would be better than living like a walking corpse. I let down the demon dragon clan. Ming Hui sighed with emotion, and 2 lines of hot tears flowed down his old cheeks. Nie Tian watched from the side and didn't say much. After a while, Ming Hui finally calmed down and suddenly looked at Nie Tian and said, How is Ni Xianlong now? Of course, Nie Tian knew that the Ni Xianlong mentioned by Ming Hui was Ni Jianming. Nie Tian didn't hide anything and told him about Ni Jianming's current situation. Finally, he said, Demon Saint Xianlong is now restoring the body of Lord Di Shi of the Golden Dragon clan. Once they succeed, they will go find the Guardian family. As long as they can find the lost dragon vein, they can revive the Dragon clan. Revive the Dragon clan. When Ming Hui heard these words, he frowned and said, Ni Xianlong still has a conscience. Back then, he didn't hesitate to destroy so many races for the sake of the Dragon Rebel clan. Now it's time for him to repent and pay the price. Nie Tian sighed softly. He had a basic understanding of what happened back then. In fact, Ni Jianming had his own difficulties. If he did not exterminate the other clans, he would not be able to protect his own clansmen. When people are in a dilemma, they tend to become cruel. Elder Ming, you just said that the power at the boundary of the universe is too strong and your body can't bear it. What do you mean? Nie Tian couldn't help but ask when he thought of Ming Hui's words. Ming Hui smiled bitterly and said, My body was seized. Although the soul fusion is very perfect, it is not my own body after all. The boundary of the universe contains the power of creation. This is an extremely powerful force. This kind of power will slowly become stronger. This requires the cultivator's strength to continuously become stronger. Otherwise, they will not be able to withstand the powerful Genesis power. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He roughly understood what Ming Hui meant. The body of the cultivator was like a container for the boundary of the universe. The stronger the boundary of the universe became, the stronger the cultivator. Otherwise, the cultivator would not be able to contain the boundary of the universe and would eventually explode. My current strength is only at the late stage of the paramount god. I can no longer improve. But the power of the boundary of the universe is constantly becoming stronger. This is too much of a burden for my body. Ming Hui smiled bitterly and said, This is why I am willing to give you the boundary of the universe. The late stage of the paramount god. Nie Tian's heart trembled. This was strength that was only one step away from the peak of the god realm. No wonder the black-robed man couldn't even withstand Ming Hui's aura. However, Nie Tian immediately realized something. He said with a look of horror, Elder Ming, even you can't withstand the power of the boundary of the universe. How can I? If the martial body of a late stage of the paramount god couldn't withstand the creation power of the boundary of the universe, how could Nye Tian, an early stage lesser god, do it? Ming Hui laughed and said, "The power of the boundary of the universe varies from person to person. When you first fuse with it, it is compatible with the cultivator's body. After that, you will slowly become stronger. Although your strength is low, your martial body is stronger than that of an ordinary peak lesser god. It is even comparable to some weaker medium gods. More importantly, your body has already fused with the heart of nothingness. The boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness are two paragon flames that reinforce and restrain each other. When the two are fused in the same martial body, they will naturally restrain each other." "I see." Nye Tian nodded slightly and said, "Elder Ming, since the boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness can restrain each other, why don't you fuse with the heart of nothingness in my body? Why give me the boundary of the universe?" People were selfish by nature, and if he could have two paragon devil flames at the same time, it would be extremely tempting. Nye Tian refused to believe that Ming Hui wouldn't be tempted. "My fleshly body has already become my greatest limitation. Even if I fuse with the heart of nothingness, I won't be able to advance any further." Ming Hui chuckled, obviously aware of Nye Tian's suspicions. In the early stages, the two devil flames will restrain each other, but in the later stages, they will fuse together and become even more powerful. In fact, they might even be more terrifying than some of the essence power. If I can't advance any further, I won't be able to handle the power of the two flames. In the end, I'll be dead. Nye Tian frowned. Never could he have guessed that things would turn out this way. It seems that if I can't reach the peak paramount god level, I'll be in the same danger. You won't, Ming Hui said with a smile. Your martial body is too strong. You have a paragon dragon bloodline body and a god devil nascent embryo body. As long as you can reach the late paramount god level, you'll be able to handle the power of the two flames. What? Nye Tian's eyes widened, and a strange expression appeared on his face. It wasn't strange that Ming Hui could see through his paragon dragon bloodline, but it was incredible that he could see through the god devil nascent embryo. The god devil nascent embryo was obviously concealed by the power of suppression that Nye Tian's parents had left inside of him. Even Nye Tian couldn't sense it, so how could Ming Hui? "I can tell from your devil vitality." Ming Hui could see the surprise in Nye Tian's eyes. "Don't worry. Very few people in the world know about devil vitality. You're safe for now, but when the god devil nascent embryo awakens, things will be different." "Devil vitality," Nye Tian said, frowning. Then he chuckled bitterly. Ming Hui had lived for more than 600,000 years, so it wasn't strange that he knew about devil vitality. Nye Tian remembered that Yi Qinghai had once told him that peak paramount gods had a lifespan of about 500,000 years. Ming Hui had lived for more than 600,000 years. Perhaps it had something to do with his devil dragon soul, or maybe it had something to do with the universal boundary. "Elder Ming, when will I be able to merge with the boundaries of this universe?" Nye Tian looked at Ming Hui and asked somewhat excitedly. He couldn't wait to fuse with the universal boundary. Chapter 14-15. Nye Tian couldn't wait to fuse with the universe boundary. His eyes were filled with excitement. Ming Hui looked at Nye Tian and said with a faint smile, "The universe boundary is the first demonic fire. When it was in my body, it accumulated too much power. To help you successfully fuse with the universe boundary, I need to prepare a few things." "What things?" Nye Tian frowned and asked in surprise. He originally thought that fusing with the universe boundary would be easy and could be completed quickly. He didn't expect it to be so troublesome. Geocentric stone, sky-breaking withered wood, dragon courage stone tooth, nine-tailed tiger bone, and an ice attribute superior god divine spark. These are the 5 most important materials. I'll prepare the other materials. Ming Hui listed out the things he needed, and Nie Tian was stunned. Although Nie Tian had never seen these things that Ming Hui was talking about, he could tell that the former was clearly going to refine a formation. Elder Ming, are these things hard to find? Nie Tian asked with a frown. The first 4 things aren't hard to find. You can buy them at the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. But the last thing, an ice attribute superior god divine spark, isn't easy to find. Ming Hui frowned and said, there aren't many ice attribute warriors to begin with. There are even fewer who can reach the superior god level. But you can go to the Medicine King Pill Pavilion to take a look. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to find it. Medicine King Pill Pavilion? Nie Tian was stunned when he heard this name. He immediately thought of the Medicine King Divine Palace. The Medicine King Pill Pavilion is in the Medicine King's ancient capital near the Demon Dragon City. It is the largest spiritual material and spiritual medicine market in the whole God territory. The things I mentioned earlier can be bought at the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. Only the superior God Divine Spark might not be able to buy it. You go to the Medicine King Pill Pavilion first. If you really can't find the Divine Spark, I will think of another way. Ming Hui said lightly. An ice attribute superior God Divine Spark was indeed hard to find. Okay. Nie Tian nodded. He had some grudges with the Divine Medicine Palace, but he still needed to go to the Medicine King's ancient capital. Take this jade token. When the people from the Medicine King Pill Pavilion see this jade token, they will help you find the spirit materials. As Ming Hui spoke, he took out a jade token and handed it to Nie Tian. Thank you, Elder Ming. Nie Tian took the jade token, glanced at it, and put it away. He had seen a similar jade token before. It was the Scarlet Moon Jade token that Yi Qinghai had given to Zhao Zi. Therefore, he speculated that what Ming Hui was giving him was the Medicine King Jade token of the Divine Medicine King Palace. Nie Tian was still worried that the things that Ming Hui needed were too expensive and he couldn't afford them. Now that he had the Medicine King's Jade card, of course, he didn't have to worry. Without further ado, Nie Tian was ready to leave. However, at this moment, Ming Hui suddenly stopped him and said, Nie Tian, you have the Sovereign Dragon vein in your body. People from Enai Lin have been eyeing you. I'm afraid there will be some trouble. Enai Lin. Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard these 2 words because he had heard of this organization before. When Tsang Yu introduced the inescapable net, he had mentioned that there were 3 mysterious organizations in the 9 major territories: the inescapable net, the Thousand Feathers Tower, and the Enai Lin. So the person who followed me was from Enai Lin. Nie Tian's expression changed slightly. He was somewhat surprised. Although he didn't know what kind of organization Enai Lin was, it must be very powerful since it was as famous as the inescapable net. The black-robed man who had followed Nie Tian was definitely at the high god level. If Ming Hui hadn't appeared in time, it would have been very difficult for Nie Tian to escape from him. Elder Ming, you mean that people from Enai Lin found me through the Sovereign Dragon vein? Nie Tian became cold and asked in a deep voice. Yes. Ming Hui nodded and said, I also don't know what kind of organization Enai Lin is. I only heard that people from Enai Lin are passionate about collecting all kinds of powerful bloodline powers. They have their eyes on your Sovereign Dragon vein, so they won't give up. Nie Tian's expression was gloomy. He had been guessing whether Enai Lin was related to the Destined One in the Dragon Rebel clan's prophecy. However, after hearing Ming Hui's words, it seemed that people from Enai Lin were not only interested in the Sovereign Dragon vein, but also other bloodline powers. People from Enai Lin have a special method to sense the power in their bloodline. Once you leave the Demon Dragon City, it is very likely that you will be targeted by people from Enai Lin again. As Ming Hui spoke, a blood-red crystal stone appeared in his hand. It was sparkling and translucent as if it was condensed from pure blood. What is this? When Nie Tian saw the crimson crystal, he immediately sensed a powerful dragon qi. he couldn't help but frown. This is the inverse dragon blood stone of the Dragon Rebel clan. It can conceal the aura of the dragon vein. Of course, and I Xianlong gave it to me to prevent my identity from being exposed. As Ming Hui spoke, he handed the inverse dragon bloodstone to Nie Tian and said, "Take the inverse dragon bloodstone with you. It can hide your dragon vein aura. In this way, the people of Enai Lin won't be able to find you." It's from the Dragon Rebel clan. Nie Tian took the inverse dragon bloodstone. His eyes couldn't help but tremble with excitement. He put the inverse dragon blood stone on his waist and immediately felt a mysterious power flow into his body. It was like a transparent shield covering the 9 dragon veins. "It's indeed a good thing." Nie Tian smiled and said, "Not only can the inverse dragon blood stone conceal the aura of the dragon vein, but it also doesn't suppress the dragon vein at all. It can even stimulate it. It's really amazing." Ming Hui nodded and said, "With the inverse dragon bloodstone, people from Enai Lin won't be able to sense the sovereign dragon vein even if they are extremely powerful." "Thank you, Elder Ming." Nie Tian bowed to express his gratitude. He didn't stay any longer and turned around to leave. "Brother Nie Tian, let me go with you." Right at this moment, Ed, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened his mouth and looked at Nie Tian with expectation. "You'll go with me?" Nie Tian was dumbfounded. He then used his consciousness to scan Ed. The strange thing was that he couldn't sense Ed's strength. He was very sure that Ed was a teenager, only 17 or 18 years old. However, his strength was so strange that even Nie Tian couldn't sense it. Nie Tian suddenly remembered that when Ed was following him, he didn't sense the latter's existence. Ed's hiding skills were even more terrifying than the superior god expert from Enai Lin. "Nie Tian, let Ed go with you. He's not weak. Maybe he can help you," Ming Hui said to Nie Tian with a faint smile. "Okay." Nie Tian nodded in agreement, but he was still curious about Ed's strength. Even Ming Hui said that he wasn't weak. Nie Tian didn't waste any more time. He immediately left the small world created by the boundary of the universe. Nie Tian and the other 2 quickly left the Demon Dragon City and headed for the Medicine King's ancient capital. "Ed, why doesn't Elder Ming go to the Medicine King's ancient capital himself? Why do you want me to go there?" On the way, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask. "Teacher is a strange old man. I can't tell him clearly." Ed laughed carelessly and said, "But I've been with Teacher for more than 10 years. He rarely leaves that space, and he has never left the Demon Dragon City. He also said that he would never leave the Demon Dragon City for the rest of his life." Nie Tian was stunned. He guessed that Ming Hui might have some difficulties that prevented him from leaving the Demon Dragon City. Chapter 14:16. The Medicine King's ancient capital, what a magnificent city! Nie Tian couldn't help but exclaim as he gazed at the Medicine King's ancient capital. It had to be said that the Medicine King's ancient capital was much bigger than Nie Tian had imagined. Based on his initial estimation, the entire city was at least a few thousand miles wide. "Haha, it's my first time in such a big city." Ed was very excited and couldn't wait to enter the city. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said to Cher, "Let's enter the city." Not long after, Nie Tian's group of 3 appeared on the bustling street of the Medicine King's ancient capital. Although the sky had just brightened, the street was already very noisy with people coming and going in an endless stream. Nie Tian was very careful and activated the holographic divine glyphs to prevent the Enai Lin's men from appearing again. However, the inverse dragon bloodstone's effect was very obvious. Nie Tian didn't notice anyone following him. He first played with Cher and Ed for a while, and then asked someone for the location of the Medicine King's Pill Pavilion. After a while, Nie Tian's group arrived in front of a grand and majestic hall. "So this is the Medicine King Pill Dispensary. It is indeed much grander than the Alchemist Guild in this world." Nie Tian looked at the great hall in front of him, the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. Without any hesitation, he walked in. The three of them entered the first floor of the hall. A few beautiful waitresses at the door bowed in unison and said in a clear and sweet voice, "Welcome, distinguished guests." "What are you doing?" It was Edie's first time seeing such a scene. He was startled and screamed. He looked at the waitresses with a frightened expression, causing the crowd to burst into laughter. Country bumpkins who haven't seen the world, coming here to embarrass themselves. Since when did the Medicine King's Pill Pavilion become so lowly? Even inhuman things dare to barge in. A group of little beggars coming to the Medicine King's Pill Pavilion to pretend to be a big bastard. They're asking for it. The crowd's discussion was more vicious than the last. Nietian frowned. However, he didn't want to lower himself to their level and stepped into the hall. "Stop." However, at this moment, an ice-cold voice rang out, following which a man in luxurious clothes walked over and coldly said, "Who are you? Get out of here." Nietian turned to look at the man and his face darkened. This well-dressed man was obviously a member of the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. He actually told Nietian and the others to scram. "What if I don't?" Nietian frowned and his eyes turned cold. "Courting death." The well-dressed man was stunned for a moment, then he roared and directly strode over. Obviously, he was going to attack Nietian and the others. Nietian stood where he was and took a small step forward. Suddenly, a sharp sword force whistled out and swept toward the man in luxurious clothes. Bang! With a muffled sound, the well-dressed man was sent flying before he could even react. He smashed heavily into a stone pillar, and when he landed on the ground, he immediately got up. However, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as paper. You actually dare to attack me!" The well-dressed man had a look of horror. He didn't expect that Nietian's strength was actually so strong. Even more, he didn't expect that Nietian actually dared to attack him. He was the steward of the Medicine King Pill Pavilion, a member of the Medicine King Divine Palace. He was actually beaten up in the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. Preposterous. "So what if I hit you?" Nie Tianling responded coldly and said, "Don't snobs like you deserve a beating?" The well-dressed man's strength was only at the Heavenly Emperor realm. Nie Tian was already being merciful to him. Otherwise, it was absolutely impossible for the latter to stand up again. This kid is crazy, right? He actually dares to attack and injure people in the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. Tired of living, openly injuring people, this is provoking the Medicine King Divine Palace. This kid is definitely dead for sure. The crowd was stunned on the spot and immediately reacted, exclaiming one after another. Right at the next instant, over a dozen black-clothed figures appeared in the dark of the hall, directly surrounding Nie Tian and the rest. Nie Tian's gaze swept a glance. These dozen over people's strength were all around peak low-level deity. One of them even had middle-level deity strength. This kind of combat strength was enough to make ordinary martial artists tremble with fear. Is this how the Medicine King Pill Pavilion treats its guests? Nie Tian's expression was grim like water, without any ripples. But his eyes flickered with a cold light. If these people really made a move, he did not mind making a move to teach them a lesson. "Stinking brat, you injured the Medicine King Pill Pavilion's steward. This is provoking the Medicine King Divine Palace. Prepare to die." The black-clothed man in the lead gave a low roar. His whole body's aura bloomed. Taking a step out, he was already prepared to make a move. "Stop." But right at this time, a clear voice suddenly sounded out. Immediately, a streak of purple light flashed past in the air. A purple-clothed woman landed and appeared above the hall. "Miss Zhao." When those black-clothed martial artists saw the arrival's face clearly, they were stunned one after another and shouted respectfully, "It's you!" Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and was also stunned for a moment. He did not expect the woman in front of him to be Zhao Qian, who had wanted to kill him previously. Looking at the group of black-clothed men's attitude towards Zhao Qian, it seemed that her status was very high. I know this person. All of you can leave. Zhao Qian's eyes moved slightly as she spoke to the black-clothed men. Yes, the dozen or so black-clothed men replied and disappeared into the corner of the Medicine King Pill Pavilion's hall. I am also very surprised. I did not expect you to actually dare to appear in the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. Zhao Qian's aura dissipated and said coldly to Nie Tianling. The Medicine King Pill Pavilion is not a restricted area. Why can't I come? Nie Tian smiled lightly. Seeing that Zhao Qian had no intention of attacking him, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Junior sister, do you know this person? At this time, another voice sounded. Then, a man in green appeared and directly descended next to Zhao Qian. A pair of cold eyes sized up Nie Tian, extremely unfriendly. He is the person who killed Elder Gui. Zhao Qian transmitted her voice to the man in green. Obviously, she did not want others to know that Nie Tian had killed Gui. The man in green frowned and his face suddenly became gloomy. His eyes revealed a hint of coldness and killing intent. Sensing the man in green's killing intent, Nie Tian's eyes sharpened. Scanning with his divine sense, he was shocked to discover that the latter's strength was actually at the peak of the lower deity stage. The man in green was not old and should be around 300 years old. To have such strength, his talent was indeed very strong. You dare to appear in the Medicine King Pill Pavilion in such an impudent manner after killing someone from the Divine Medicine King Palace. Do you think the Divine Medicine King Palace is so easily bullied? The man in green suddenly took a step forward and the aura of his whole body surged out. His entire body was like a sharp sword that suddenly revealed its sharpness. Swordsman! Nie Tian was suddenly stunned. Feeling the other party's sword aura, he sensed a familiar aura, sword pattern. It was obvious that the man in green was a swordsman who had condensed sword pattern. Condensing sword pattern was equivalent to stepping into a whole new realm of sword principle. He was a swordsman of a higher level. In addition, this person's strength was at the peak of the lower deity stage. His battle strength was definitely not weaker than an early middle deity stage warrior. Senior brother Xing, what are you trying to do? Zhao Qian could not help but frown when she saw the man in green's killing intent. She was actually a little angry. The man in green was called Xing Kaiqiao. He was one of the 4 great demons of the Divine Medicine King Palace of the new generation. He was extremely strong. Chapter 14-17. Kill him. The 2 cold words resounded in the hall on the first floor of the Medicine King Elixir Dispensary. Xing Kaiqiao stared at Nie Tian with a pair of fierce eyes, not concealing his inner murderous intent. Nie Tian had killed people from the Medicine King Palace and now appeared in the Medicine King Elixir Dispensary. This was the most blatant provocation to the Medicine King Palace. How could Xing Kaiqiao tolerate him? You want to kill me? Nie Tian felt the strong murderous intent from Xing Kaiqiao and could not help but stare. Boy, you killed people from the Medicine King Palace. Don't think you can leave here alive today. With a bellow, Xing Kaiqiao took a step forward and unleashed his sword aura, which morphed into a fierce sword shadow that shot towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's reaction was extremely fast. With a shake of his body, he also released a wave of sword force. Bang! The 2 sword forces collided in the air, and a muffled sound like iron and stone colliding. Suddenly, a wave of sword intent spread out, and the onlookers all retreated to avoid it. Huh! When Xing Kaiqiao saw this, he could not help but frown, unable to conceal the surprise on his face. That sword force just now, although it was a test, was not something an ordinary person could withstand. The fact that Nie Tian could easily withstand this sword was beyond his expectations. Nie Tian looked at Xing Kaiqiao and was slightly shocked. A sword-patterned swordsman was indeed very powerful. If his sword intent was not strong enough, he would not have been able to withstand that sword force just now. Boy, your sword principle realm is not bad. You have already comprehended the profound meaning. Unfortunately, the person you met is me. I will let you understand that a profound swordsman is trash in front of a sword-patterned swordsman. Zheng Kai Qiao said coldly, and the murderous intent in his eyes became more intense. He felt a strong threat from Nie Tian, and at this moment, his heart was already determined to kill. Nie Tian was only a profound swordsman, and he could already fight him head-on. If he condensed a sword pattern and became a sword-pattern swordsman, he was afraid that he would not be a match for him. Shameless boasting! Nie Tianling laughed. His eyes were as deep as water, and there was not the slightest ripple on his face. He had already asked Sakura before. There were 6 levels of the sword Dao in the God realm. Sword mark, sword vein, sword bone, sword essence, sword forgetting self, and sword and martial arts unity. The sword Dao of the plane world was known as the spirit realm sword Dao. It cultivated the soul sword Dao and mainly trained the swordsman's sword intent and sword soul. The sword Dao of the realms was called the sword Dao of the immortal realm. It was the sword Dao of the martial body. The sword intent and the sword soul were fused into the martial body of a martial practitioner. The sword patterns entered the meridians, the sword bones entered the marrow, the sword souls forgot each other, and the sword and martial arts became one. Rumor has it that a swordsman who has reached the realm of sword and martial unity would have his entire martial body fused with the sword. I am the sword, and the sword is me. Nie Tian specially asked Sakura. The reason why Cher was so powerful was not only because her godhead far surpassed the average person, but also because her sword Dao had reached the sword bone realm. A swordsman at the sword bone realm not only condensed the profound sword intent in his body into sword marks and fused into the Yuan meridians, but even the bones in his entire body were filled with the powerful sword mark power. In other words, not only did Cher's attack power was astonishing, her defense power was even more terrifying. According to Sakura's estimation, Cher's current battle power should be between the peak of mid-god and early-stage high-god. It was precisely because of such battle power that she could seriously injure Zhang Qinzong, who had mid-stage mid-god strength, with one sword strike. The current Zheng Kai Qiao's cultivation was half a realm higher than Cher's, but his sword Dao realm was a full 2 great realms lower. Therefore, Cher still had the strength to kill him with one sword strike. But for Nie Tian, it was not so easy to defeat Zheng Kai Qiao. His strength and sword Dao realm were weaker than Zheng Kai Qiao, but the devil aura in his body was slightly stronger than the latter's godhead. But he still had an advantage, that was, he had 4 kinds of sword intent in his body at the same time, which was the main reason why he was stronger than other swordsmen of the same realm. Brat, I think you are the one who is boasting shamelessly. Zheng Kai Qiao was infuriated by Nie Tian's words. He suddenly roared and released his whole body's sword intent, which instantly condensed into a sword shadow. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly. He had the starry sky eyes, so he could clearly see that there were terrifying runes surging on Zheng Kai Qiao's sword shadow. They were sword marks. The sword shadow that appeared in front of him was not big, only tens of meters long, but its powerful momentum was shocking, and the sharp chill revealed a murderous intention. Starry sky devouring. Nie Tian frowned. He directly used one of the 3 forbidden moves of the starry sky ancient martial technique, and at the same time integrated the power of the Ao sword skills Weeping Blood and Soul. His blood chi and sword intent instantly erupted, condensing into a sword shadow that was not huge, and suddenly attacked. Boom! The 2 sword shadows collided in the air, and a violent explosion came out. The whole hall trembled violently, and a tyrannical sword intent chi wave rushed out and spread in all directions. Nie Tian reacted very quickly. He frowned, and the meteor wings appeared behind him. He stepped back 100 meters, and the sword intent all over his body blocked the remaining power of the chi wave. On the other hand, Zheng Kai-chiao looked a little embarrassed. He was hit by the chi wave of the sword intent and flew out. When his figure landed, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was extremely ugly. When the onlookers saw this scene, their eyes and faces directly became dull. They never thought that in the head-on collision between Nie Tian and Zheng Kai-chiao, Nie Tian actually had the upper hand. Most people's eyes were locked on Nie Tian, and their faces were full of disbelief. Zhao Qian was watching from the side, and her pretty face was also stunned. She couldn't believe the scene in front of her. She was Zheng Kai-chiao Sr., and of course she knew how powerful Zheng Kai-chiao was. The latter was one of the top 3 geniuses of the younger generation in the palace of the Divine Medicine King. He was also an important figure in the grand competition of the 12 shrines. But who would have thought that such a figure would actually be at a disadvantage against an early-stage low god? Cher was watching from the side, and the corners of her mouth slightly curled up. She was obviously very happy. Ed, on the other hand, raised his eyebrows, and his face was full of surprise. He seemed to know Nie Tian's strength, and was very surprised by this result. This is impossible. At this moment, Zheng Kai-chiao finally recovered from the shock and roared furiously. His originally delicate and handsome face actually became somewhat hideous. He was a freakishly talented martial artist of the Divine Palace of Medicine King, a proud son of heaven, a genius. How could he lose to an early-stage low god of profound swordsman? Moreover, there were so many people watching, and most importantly, Zhao Qian was also at the side. One should know that Zhao Qian was the girl he admired. To be defeated in front of the girl he admired, this was enough to drive Zheng Kai-chiao crazy. Nie Tian's reaction was very calm. He said in a cold tone, "A loss is a loss. Nothing is impossible." Although he said so, Nie Tian knew very well that Zheng Kai-chiao was only at a disadvantage because he was too careless. "Stinking brat, I'll kill you." However, at this moment, Zheng Kai-chiao was completely enraged. His eyes suddenly turned crimson red, and he roared like a wild beast. His entire body shook, and a huge green sword that looked like a long snake actually floated behind him. Chapter 14:18. Huh! Above the hall, Nie Tian saw the green giant sword behind Zheng Kai-chiao and could not help but frown. He immediately understood that the latter actually released the giant's spiritual true body. The giant's spiritual true body was even more terrifying at the deity state. It was a martial artist's most powerful trump card. The giant spiritual true body of a deity state martial artist was enough to split mountains and split the seas. Zheng Kai-chiao using the giant spiritual true body at this time was obviously furious. Nie Tian's face involuntarily darkened, but he was thinking about how to end the situation in front of him. He judged from Zhao Qian's attitude towards Zheng Kai-chiao that Zheng Kai-chiao's status in the Medicine King Palace was not low, so this person could not be killed. If he killed Zheng Kai-chiao, even if Nie Tian had the Medicine King Jade card on him, the people from the Medicine King Palace would not let it go. Don't tell me I have to use the Medicine King Jade card now? Nie Tian's brows sank slightly, and his expression was uncertain. He guessed that even if he took out the Medicine King Jade card now, the furious Zheng Kai-chiao might not stop. Instead, he would slander him and say that his Medicine King Jade card was fake. Fine. Suddenly, Nie Tian's eyes darkened and he said coldly, "Since you want to fight, then I'll fight with you." Reckless. Zheng Kai-chiao saw that Nie Tian had no fear, which aggravated the anger in his heart. With a roar, the green giant sword behind him moved with a loud bang, like a green giant snake, pressing towards Nie Tian. The hall of the Medicine King Elixir Dispensary was thousands of meters long and wide, and each floor was hundreds of meters high. But such a space was still far from enough for a deity state martial artist. Zheng Kai-chiao still had some rationality, and deliberately suppressed the strength of the giant spiritual true body. Otherwise, once the Medicine King Elixir Dispensary's protection killing array was triggered, it would be troublesome. The Medicine King Elixir Dispensary was the most important place in the entire deity domain. Of course, it had a powerful protection array. If the Medicine King Pill Pavilion's protective killing formation was triggered, even a high god expert would be killed on the spot. Nie Tian frowned slightly. His body trembled as a crimson-golden sea of lightning appeared behind him. A powerful dragon chi gushed out like a raging storm. Following which, 100-meter-long crimson-golden dragon appeared, its earth-shattering roar resounding through the entire hall. Of course, Nie Tian was not stupid. The moment he entered the Medicine King Pill House, he could sense that there was a strong array formation protecting the inside of the pill house. Zheng Kai Qiao did not dare to fully release the strength of his giant spirit true body because he was afraid of triggering the Pill Pavilion's killing array. Nie Tian also didn't dare to fully unleash the power of the Supreme Dragon Vein for fear of triggering the killing array. The reason why he did not use the 9th Extreme Chaos Beast now was because he was afraid that the 9th Extreme Chaos Beast was too strong. If it triggered the killing array in the Elixir Pavilion, it would be terrible. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of countless pairs of eyes, the giant cyan sword and the giant crimson golden dragon collided, and a powerful force erupted. In an instant, sword will and dragon energy filled the entire hall. The crowd couldn't withstand the impact and was forced to retreat again. Nie Tian and Zheng Kai Qiao retreated a few steps at the same time. At the same time, they stabilized themselves. They were actually equally matched. Boom! However, at that moment, Nie Tian suddenly heard an ear-piercing sound. He frowned and looked up abruptly. A crimson flame arrow was flying towards his face, piercing through the air with extreme killing intent. Zhao Qian. He really didn't expect that Zhao Qian would make a move at this moment. Nie Tian's entire focus was on Zheng Kai Qiao and didn't pay attention to the others. At that moment, when he realized that the crimson flame arrow was flying towards him, he wanted to react, but it was a little too late. Cher was also too focused on the battle and didn't pay much attention to it. She didn't react in time. Nie Tian's expression changed slightly. A wave of sword will surged out of his body as he prepared to forcefully block Zhao Qian's sword. Zhao Qian wasn't weak, and arrow spirit martial artists were originally good at sneak attacks. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be easy for Nie Tian to block her arrow. Now that he was in such a hurry, it was very difficult for him to block this arrow. Shameless sneak attack. Just as the crimson flame arrow was less than 10 meters away from Nie Tian, a mocking voice suddenly rang out. Following that, a lean figure flashed and blocked the fatal arrow. That figure landed steadily, holding the arrow formed from flames in his hand. With just a little bit of strength, the crimson flame arrow shattered. Nie Tian was suddenly stunned. Looking at the figure that appeared beside him, he was extremely surprised. Although everything happened in an instant, he saw it very clearly. Edi's speed was extremely fast. He had actually blocked Zhao Qian's crimson flame arrow with his bare hands. What a powerful martial body! Nie Tian's heart trembled violently as he exclaimed in admiration. Nie Tian had already experienced the power of Zhao Qian's arrow. Ed could actually block the former's arrow with his bare hands. The perverseness of his martial body was evident. Nie Tian asked himself, with his current martial body, if he forcefully blocked Zhao Qian's arrow, even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. The strength of Edi's martial body far exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. At this moment, Nie Tian finally understood why Minghui agreed to let Ed come with him. The sudden scene made everyone at the scene dumbfounded. Their eyes stared at the lean figure in a daze. Their mouths were wide open but they couldn't say a word for a long time. What's going on? Zhao Qian was in midair with a dazed expression. Following that, she seemed to understand something. Her pair of beautiful eyes trembled as she looked at the rather unprepossessing Ed. She was immediately stunned. Her small mouth opened slightly and her expression was extremely shocked. Zhao Qian herself didn't know what was going on with that arrow. She seemed to have lost her focus for a moment and then shot an arrow out of the blue. What made her even more surprised was that Ed had actually blocked her arrow with his bare hands. Ed came together with Nie Tian, but he seemed extremely inconspicuous. From the beginning to the end, Zhao Qian didn't even look at him. But how could she have imagined that such a person who couldn't even be found in a crowd could actually block her arrow with his bare hands? It was simply too strange. If it was purely a martial body, one would need at least a peak intermediate deity or even a superior deity to be able to block Zhao Qian's arrow with their bare hands. Ed was only 17 or 18 years old. It was clearly impossible for him to have such strength. Then there could only be one explanation for his martial body being so powerful. He was a heaven and earth spiritual body martial artist, and an extremely powerful heaven and earth spiritual body. This lady, you look very beautiful, but your heart isn't very kind. Big brother Nie Tian is currently fighting with your senior brother. How can you sneak an attack? At this moment, Ed opened his mouth. His faint voice fell in the hall, appearing somewhat immature and nervous. What this lady does doesn't need you to care. Zhao Qian reacted at this moment and reprimanded in a low voice. Her pretty face was extremely gloomy. She herself didn't know what was going on with that arrow just now. She had enmity with Nie Tian, but she similarly remembered that Nie Tian had once spared her life. Although she said that she would still find Nie Tian to take revenge, but her heart was already wavering. Moreover, even if Nie Tian didn't let her off, she would also disdain to do something like sneak an attack from behind. I was controlled by someone just now. Zhao Qian was suddenly taken aback and immediately reacted. Her eyes flickered as she looked at the crowd below the hall. Sigh. Ed didn't know what was going on as he gave a long sigh with an experienced look and said, "Teacher is right. Beautiful women are all unreliable." Chapter 14-19. In the main hall of the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion, the crowd was dumbfounded. Everything that happened today was too strange and far exceeded their expectations. At this moment, Cher suddenly raised her head, her eyes sparkling like ice as she said coldly, "Miss Zhao, Nie Tian once spared your life. It's fine if you aren't grateful, but why did you sneak attack him?" At this moment, even she was angry. If it wasn't for Edie's timely intervention, Nie Tian might have been seriously injured. Zhao Qian's brows were tightly knitted, her face was embarrassed. There was bitterness in her heart that she couldn't express. She also didn't know what happened just now. Who was it that was so terrifying to be able to control her in the dark? Cher, you can't blame her for this. She was controlled by someone just now. Nie Tian frowned as he looked at Zhao Qian's reaction and said in a deep voice. Then, he turned his gaze and swept across the crowd. In that instant, Nie Tian faintly sensed an extremely powerful spiritual wave. Then, he looked at Zhao Qian's reaction and understood. Although Zhao Qian was eager for revenge, she didn't seem like the kind of person who would launch a sneak attack from behind. Therefore, there could only be one explanation for the arrow just now. Zhao Qian was controlled by someone. Nie Tian's gaze swept across the crowd. The holographic divine sigil enveloped them, but he didn't detect anyone suspicious. That person's mental strength is very strong. He is extremely proficient in mental attacks and divine sense manipulation. He hid among the crowd. Even if I have the holographic divine sigil, I can't find him, Nie Tian said in his heart. Mental attacks, Nie Tian could also do it, but only when others weren't paying attention. But the person behind the scenes could actually do divine sense manipulation. This was very frightening. Zhao Qian was young, but she had the strength of a late-stage low-god. Her temperament and willpower were not ordinary. There was actually someone who could control her in an instant. This person's technique was very exquisite. Who is it? Get out here. At this moment, Zheng Kai-chiao also instantly understood. With a roar, he released the sword will around him, turning it into a formless pressure that enveloped the crowd. He really wanted to kill Nie Tian, but he also had his own pride. He was a monstrous martial artist, a proud son of heaven. He could take Nie Tian's life on his own. He didn't need anyone's help. Using Zhao Qian to launch a sneak attack was an insult to Zheng Kai-chiao. As the deep roar faded, everyone present trembled in fear, but no one stood out. Nie Tian shook his head with a wry smile and said, "Since this person is attacking from behind, how could he take the initiative to stand out? Despicable bastard, don't let me catch you, or I'll tear you to pieces." Zheng Kai-chiao growled with a murderous look in his eyes, but then he looked at Nie Tian with a gloomy face and said, "Nie Tian, you are qualified to be my opponent. I am looking forward to our next confrontation. Next time, you won't be so lucky." Zheng Kai-chiao didn't want to continue fighting Nie Tian after being sneak attacked. Moreover, he wasn't sure if he could really kill Nie Tian with his current strength. "Nie Tian, I will soon advance to the Sword Vein realm. The next time we fight, you won't be able to withstand my sword." Zheng Kai-chiao sneered to himself. He was a peak lower celestial expert, but in order to participate in the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, he had to suppress his strength and not break through to the middle celestial realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't be qualified to participate in the lower celestial realm. Therefore, he was now focusing on Sword Principle. The improvement of Sword Principle realm could still make a qualitative leap in his strength. Zheng Kai-chiao even felt that as long as his Sword Principle realm improved again, he would no longer be one of the 3 monstrous martial artists of the Palace of Medicine King, but the #1 genius of the Palace of Medicine King. And in the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, he even had the confidence to compete for the lower celestial chief position. It was precisely because of this that Zheng Kai-chiao had no need to continue fighting with Nie Tian. "Sure." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "I believe you will also participate in the grand competition of the 12 Shrine in 2 months. I am looking forward to fighting with you." Zheng Kai-chiao had his own plans, and so did Nie Tian. During the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, Nie Tian had already merged with the boundary of the universe. With the dual supreme fires in his body, would he still be afraid of Zheng Kai-chiao? Zheng Kai-chiao's mouth twitched, but he no longer spoke to Nie Tian. His cold eyes swept across the audience and said, "You villain, don't let me find you. Otherwise, I will kill you with my own hands." After saying that, Zheng Kai-chiao turned around and said to Zhao Qian, "Junior sister, let's go." "Yes." Zhao Qian nodded slightly, but her eyes flickered, as if she were pondering something. Finally, she turned to look at Nie Tian. After a moment of pondering, she said, "Nie Tian, I'll also participate in the competition between the 12 divine palaces. That is the last chance I will give myself for revenge. If I cannot kill you at the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, I will not seek revenge from you again." "All right." Nie Tian's lips curled up as he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. After the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, he would no longer have to worry about Zhao Qian's pursuit. "See you again." Zhao Qian nodded and turned around to leave. "Hey!" Just then, Edi's voice rang out. He said with some embarrassment, I'm sorry just now. You weren't the one who ambushed me. I was mistaken." Ed, of course, already knew that Zhao Qian was not the one who ambushed Nie Tian. She was just a pawn controlled by someone else. "Didn't you say that beautiful women are unreliable?" Zhao Qian looked at Ed coldly and said, "You don't need to apologize." After that, Zhao Qian and Zheng Kai-chiao did not stay any longer. They walked out of the hall and disappeared into thin air. Ed was dumbfounded and couldn't speak for a long time. Only when Zhao Qian's figure disappeared did he mutter, "Teacher is right. Women are indeed strange animals." "Is that so?" Cher heard Edie's words and her beautiful eyes flickered. She sneered. Edie couldn't help but shudder. He chuckled. Other women are strange animals. Sister Cher is a normal animal. You're the animal. Shue scolded him with an exasperated expression, then ignored Ed. Nye Tian walked over. Of course, he heard Edie's words. He was speechless. It seemed that Ming Hui had been hurt by a woman before. As a result, Ed became like this. Nye Tian, are you okay? Cher took a step forward and asked worriedly. I'm fine. Nye Tian smiled faintly. The battle with Zheng Kai-chiao was very beneficial to him. His understanding of sword runes deepened. He believed that not long later, his sword path realm would definitely increase. Let's go to the second floor to take a look. After the battle, Nye Tian obviously did not forget the purpose of coming to the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. He immediately entered the second floor with Cher and Ed. As Nye Tian walked, he activated the holographic divine runes and carefully sensed the surroundings. But because of the protective spiritual formation in the Pill Pavilion, he was unable to construct a holographic projection of the Pill Pavilion. He did not give up on finding the person who was secretly controlling Zhao Qian. This person was a hidden and terrifying enemy. He had to find him. Mister, is there anything I can help you with? At this time, a figure suddenly sounded behind him. Nye Tian turned around. The person who appeared in front of him was an old man in green. He was smiling and gentle. Chapter 1420. Nye Tian and the rest had just arrived at the second level when a green-robed elder suddenly appeared behind them. He had a smile on his face and was amiable. However, when Nye Tian turned around to look at the green-robed elder, his eyes could not help but darken, as though he had discovered something. He then smiled and said, "Old mister, are you from the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion?" Nye Tian's divine sense swept across the green-robed elder and found that the latter's mental energy was very strong. Moreover, this person could appear behind them without anyone noticing, which was enough to show that he could control his aura freely. Controlling one's aura seemed simple, but in reality, it was extremely difficult. This was because the stronger a warrior was, the stronger their aura was. It was easy to control one's aura, but it was extremely difficult to perfectly conceal one's aura. For example, Qi Yifeng and Dugu Lingtian, whom Nye Tian saw previously, could not perfectly conceal their aura, but Nye Tian could still sense their strength. However, the green-robed elder in front of him had perfect control over his aura. When Nye Tian's divine sense enveloped him, he could not sense the slightest fluctuation of aura. Without a doubt, this person was a very frightening person. Nye Tian had some suspicions that this green-robed elder was the person who was secretly controlling Zhao Qian. Moreover, this person seemed to be amiable, but there was a trace of darkness hidden in his eyes, and this was something that could not be concealed. "I am Gong Chen, the Pavilion Master of the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion." Gong Chen smiled faintly, a friendly smile hanging on his lips. "Pavilion Master of the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion." Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart. From Ming Hui's words, he had roughly understood the status of the Medicine King Elixir Dispensary. The Dispensary Master should have an extremely high status in the Divine Medicine King Palace. At the very least, he should be an inner sect elder of the Divine Medicine King Palace or a Deputy Palace Master or something like that. It was obvious that Gong Chen must have seen the battle between Nye Tian and Zheng Kai-chiao just now, but he did not make a move. It seemed like he was only playing the role of a spectator, which made Nye Tian feel a little strange. "Pavilion Master, this is my first time coming to the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion, but I am surprised that Pavilion Master personally received me." "What an honor!" Nye Tian smiled and said humbly. Under normal circumstances, the owner of the Medicine King Pill Pavilion would not casually appear. Nye Tian did not take out the Medicine King's jade plate, but Gong Chen took the initiative to appear. This was also very strange. Young Master Nye is too modest. Gong Chen smiled faintly. His eyes flickered as he said, "A disciple of the Nye clan who can take out a wind cloud medallion is enough for I to show up." Nye Tian's gaze trembled slightly as his body trembled. He never imagined that Gong Chen would know that he was from the Feng Yun Nye clan, and even know about the Feng Yun token. "Nye Tian, what's wrong?" Cher noticed that there was something wrong with Nye Tian's expression. She couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment before asking nervously. "I'm fine." Nye Tian shook his head slightly and calmed down. He looked gloomily at Gong Chen and transmitted his voice. "How do you know all this?" "Young Master Nye, don't be nervous." A strange smile appeared on Gong Chen's face as he transmitted his voice. "I've received Elder Solitary's order to wait for you here. What do you want? Just tell me. As long as the Medicine King Pill Pavilion has it, you can take it." Duguling Tian. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, but he immediately understood and his expression changed drastically. Gong Chen was from the inescapable net. In the entire God-stunning territory, only the inescapable net knew that Nye Tian had a wind cloud medallion. The Elder Solitary that Gong Chen spoke of was obviously Duguling Tian. Who would have thought that the owner of the Medicine King Pill Pavilion in the Divine Medicine Palace was from the inescapable net? The inescapable net was indeed extraordinary. It was all-pervasive and lived up to its name. At the same time, Nye Tian also understood that after he left Guilar City, his whereabouts were all within the inescapable net's grasp. Otherwise, Duguling Tian wouldn't have known that he would come to the Medicine King Pill Pavilion. Nye Tian couldn't help but feel a slight chill in his heart. The inescapable net was indeed an extremely terrifying organization. Since that's the case, then I won't stand on ceremony. Nye Tian became cold, laughed and said, "I need 50 types of divine materials. Geocentric stone, broken heaven's withered wood, gentian stone tooth, 9-tailed tiger bone, and an ice attribute godhead of a high god." Also, Nye Tian listed 50 divine materials in one breath based on the display items he had seen in the hall on the first floor. They were all high-grade divine materials, and any one of them was worth a fortune. The last time he dealt with the people from the inescapable net, Nye Tian suffered a loss. A drop of his and Cher's blood, in addition to his own promise, in exchange for a useless demon fire diagram. However, this couldn't be blamed on the inescapable net. It should be Ming Hui who planned everything behind the scenes. Nye Tian was lucky to meet Ming Hui by chance. Now that there was a chance to slaughter the inescapable net, how could Nye Tian let it go? Gulp. Gong Chen was stunned, and his throat rolled involuntarily. He didn't expect that Nye Tian would demand an exorbitant price and ask for so many divine materials in one breath. The Divine Medicine Palace had all these things, but if they were given out for free, he, the Pavilion Master, would probably be held accountable. "Are you all right, Sect Master?" Nye Tian asked with a playful smile on his face. "No, I'm fine." Gong Chen came back to his senses, wiped the sweat on his forehead and said, "Young Master Nye, please wait a moment, I'll go prepare now." Gong Chen was not a fool. Of course, he could see that Nye Tian was demanding an exorbitant price. But Duguling Tian said that no matter what Nye Tian asked for, he must satisfy it. Gong Chen couldn't figure out why Duguling Tian would give such an order. This was clearly to help Nye Tian. The inescapable net had never done such a losing business. Although he knew that Nye Tian was extorting him, Gong Chen couldn't do anything. He didn't dare to go against Duguling Tian's orders. "Many thanks, Sect Master," Nye Tian said with a smile, his face expressionless. However, he was also thinking why Duguling Tian would do so much to help him. It seemed that the inescapable net also wanted him to merge with the boundary of the universe. "Is it just to increase my strength and release the 7 kills as soon as possible?" Nye Tian muttered to himself, and his eyes flickered. He had a hunch that things might not be as simple as they seemed on the surface. Dugulingtian has my and Cher's blood. I wonder if he will see anything. If he knows that I have the godfiend vital fetus body, will he harm me? Also, Cher's identity can't be exposed. Nyetian thought to himself, and the worry on his face became obvious. After that, Nyetian, Cher, and the others waited on the spot. Not long after, Gong Chen's figure appeared again, and a person followed behind him. It was the supervisor who had been beaten up by Nyetian. At this moment, the supervisor's eyes were filled with shock. He followed beside Gong Chen, not daring to raise his head, and he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Only now did he realize how terrifying the identity of Nyetian and the others was. They actually made the pavilion master personally choose the divine materials for them, and he even sent them over personally. There were 40 to 50 divine materials, and every single one of them was priceless. Nyetian actually wanted so many divine materials at once. His identity was simply terrifying. Chapter 14:21. Young Master Nye, I've prepared what you wanted. Gong Chen walked over with the steward. His eyes lit up and he said, but I don't have a godhead of an ice element high god for now. I'll help you find it within 3 days and send someone to deliver it to the HeavenNet platform in the Demon Dragon City. You can go there and get it. My lord, here's your stuff. The steward respectfully handed over the storage bag. He kept his head down and didn't dare to look at Nyetian. He was obviously afraid that Nyetian would recognize him. However, with Nyetian's perception, he would be able to recognize him even if he hid in a crack. Thank you. Of course, Nyetian wouldn't stoop to his level. He smiled faintly and took the storage bag. He didn't check it and put it away. Since Dugulingtian gave the order, Gong Chen didn't have the guts to play any trick. Nyetian did not expect Gong Chen to be so fast. He even took the godhead and delivered it to Nyetian in 3 days. Nyetian did not expect Gong Chen to be so fast. One had to admit that the people from the nets and nets were very serious. From this point of view, the uneasiness in Nyetian's heart became even more intense. It was as if he had suddenly become a very important person in the eyes of the nets and nets. It was strange. Dugulingtian must have found something in his blood. Otherwise, his attitude wouldn't have changed so quickly. Lord Pavilion Master, since it's done, I won't stay any longer. I'll take my leave now. Nyetian calmed down. It was useless to think about it now. It was better to go back as soon as possible and merge the boundary of the universe. He immediately said goodbye to Gong Chen. Young Master Nye, please wait. Gong Chen called out, Can I have a word with you? HM? Nyetian was startled. It seemed that Gong Chen had something important to say to Nyetian. He thought for a moment and said, Of course. Gong Chen showed such kindness. There was no reason for him to harm Nyetian. Nyetian asked Cher and Ed to wait for him there. Then, he followed Gong Chen to a secret room. Nyetian smiled and said with a calm expression, What do you want to say, Sect Master? Young Master Nye, Elder Solitary asked me to bring a few words to you. Gong Chen nodded slightly and said. He said that after young Master Nye fuses with the boundary of the universe, you don't need to go to the HeavenNet platform anymore. Why? Nyetian was taken aback for a moment, then asked, If the transaction is successful, shouldn't I be going to the net gate? According to the rules of the inescapable net, once the transaction was completed, the party who made the transaction would have to enter the inescapable net gate. And 99% of those who entered the inescapable net gate would die there. Nyetian was prepared to go to the legendary inescapable net gate after merging the universe's boundary. He didn't expect Dugulingtian to tell him that he didn't need to go to the HeavenNet platform anymore. Elder Solitary said that the net gate is extremely dangerous. It won't be too late to leave after young Master Nye's strength reaches the high god stage. Gong Chen nodded and said with a calm face. That works too. Nie Tian let out a strange laugh and said, "Since Elder Solitary said so, of course I won't object." From Gong Chen's words, it seemed that Dugu Lingtian was afraid that Nie Tian would die in the net gate, so he didn't want him to leave. Could it be that the inescapable net is afraid of the powerful Nie family behind Nie Tian? Nie Tian couldn't figure it out at the moment, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Anything else? Nie Tian looked at Gong Chen and asked. Gong Chen's eyes flickered and he said, "Elder Solitary has a special request. He said that you can agree to it or not. It's entirely up to you." Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and asked, "What request?" "The girl beside you." Gong Chen's eyes trembled again and his voice trembled. "Cher." Nie Tian's eyes darkened and his expression changed. If the inescapable net dared to target Cher, he definitely wouldn't agree. "Yes." Gong Chen nodded and said, "Elder Solitary said that Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief hope that Miss Cher will join the inescapable net. Moreover, she's the princess of the inescapable net, so she's on equal footing with Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief in the inescapable net." "Let Cher join the inescapable net?" Nie Tian was stunned and didn't hear the rest of the sentence clearly. He directly said, "Impossible. Cher had a pure heart, so how could Nie Tian let her get involved with an organization like the inescapable net?" "Young Master Nie, you didn't hear me clearly." Gong Chen already knew that Nie Tian would have this reaction, so he said, "Elder Solitary said that this matter is entirely up to young Master Nie. However, once Miss Cher joins the inescapable net, she'll be the supreme existence of the inescapable net. Her status will be even more noble than Elder Solitary." The inescapable net had two supremes, Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief. Cher would be on equal footing with Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief if she joined the inescapable net as a princess. But everyone in the inescapable net knew that the princess status was even more noble than Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief. Gong Chen had just met Cher and really couldn't understand why Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief would make such a decision. Cher's talent was indeed heaven-defying. She already had the strength of a low god in her teens. But that was all. There was nothing strange about her. How could she live up to the title of princess? Gong Chen's perception was indeed very strong, but he could only see the Wan Jian bloodline in Cher's body. He couldn't see the 3 lives meridian. "I said it's impossible. Even if you let Cher be the master of the inescapable net, I won't let her join the inescapable net." Nie Tian's attitude was very stiff as he said with a cold face. Little did he know that the inescapable net wanted Cher to be the master of the inescapable net. "All right." Gong Chen sighed helplessly. He had long known that this would be the result. But he still said, "Elder Solitary said that young Master Nie can change your mind at any time. The inescapable net's door is always open to Miss Cher." "There's no need for that." Nie Tianling responded coldly. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." With that, Nie Tian turned and left without waiting for Gong Chen's response. "I'll see you off, young Master Nie." Gong Chen smiled awkwardly and followed behind Nie Tian. The two soon arrived at where Cher and the others were. "Cher let's go," Nie Tian said in a deep voice. Without any delay, they immediately left. Gong Chen looked at the backs of Nie Tian and the others with a helpless expression. Finally, his gaze locked onto Cher and he murmured to himself, "What is this girl? She actually made Lord Sky Chief and Lord Earth Chief make such a decision. And this Nie Tian is also very terrifying. The Nie clan's people are indeed extraordinary." Oh no. The next moment, Gong Chen suddenly thought of something and exclaimed in his heart, "I forgot to remind Nie Tian that he's being targeted by an Ailin." An Ailin. When Gong Chen was watching the battle between Nie Tian and Xing Kaiqiao, he sensed that someone had secretly controlled Zhao Qian to launch a sneak attack. Although he didn't find the person, he sensed a trace of a strange aura. He was very familiar with that aura. It was something that only Ni Lin would have. Gong Chun originally wanted to follow and inform Nye Tian, but after thinking about it, he gave up the idea. How could a disciple of the Nye family not be protected by experts? Chapter 1422. After leaving the Medicine King Pill Pavilion, Nye Tian didn't stop and went straight to the Demon Dragon City. Along the way, he gradually calmed down and recalled Gong Chen's word. His expression became serious. The Nets and Nets' attitude toward him suddenly changed greatly. They allowed him to enter the Nets gate after he became stronger. This was very strange. But what was even stranger was that the Nets and Nets wanted to rope in Cher. They even offered her the identity of a princess to be on the same level as the heaven and earth duo of the Nets and Net. Dugu Lingtian obtained Mai and Cher's blood. He must have figured something out. Don't tell me they already know Snow's true identity? Nye Tian thought to himself as his expression flickered with uncertainty. Elder Sword, Di Shi Tian, and I Jianming, these people all said that Cher's identity must not be exposed. Otherwise, it would bring him great disaster. However, the current situation was that the inescapable Net seemed to have discovered Snow's identity, and yet they were treating her with great enthusiasm. What does the Nets and Nets know? Nye Tian thought to himself, but he couldn't figure it out. His heart was in a mess as he frowned. Nye Tian, what's wrong? Cher saw Nye Tian's strange expression and asked worriedly. Big brother Nye Tian, did that pavilion lord say something to you? Ed was very observant. Seeing Nye Tian's worried expression, he couldn't help but ask. I'm fine. Nye Tian waved his hand and forced a smile. Let's hurry back to the Demon Dragon City. Ming Hui used to be the Demon Dragon King, a powerhouse of the same generation as Ni Jianming. Nye Tian wanted to ask him some questions. However, he was prepared. Even if Ming Hui knew Cher's identity, he wouldn't dare to reveal it. Even if I can't get Cher's identity from Elder Ming, I have to at least ask about the Nets and Nets, Nye Tian thought to himself and quickened his pace. Soon, the three of them left the Medicine King's ancient capital and headed towards the Demon Dragon City. Big brother Nye Tian. At that moment, Ed suddenly sent a voice transmission to Nye Tian. His voice was slightly nervous. What's wrong? Nye Tian's eyes flickered, but his expression did not change as he transmitted his voice. Yes, it seems like someone has been following us. Ed was very smart. He didn't show anything on his face, but his tone was very nervous. Someone's following me? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. After which, he activated his holographic divine imprints, causing them to envelop the area behind him. When his holographic divine rune wasn't activated, his perception wasn't that strong. However, activating the holographic divine rune required a lot of mental energy, so he couldn't activate it at all times. The formless holographic divine runes spread out. In the void behind him, a figure was hiding there, faintly discernible. This person's concealment method was very clever. If it weren't for Edie's reminder, Nye Tian wouldn't have discovered this person's existence at all. As expected, someone's following us. Nye Tian's expression sank when he sensed that person's existence. After which, he discovered that this person's mental energy was extremely strong, as vast as the ocean, unfathomably deep. And almost at the same time, that person seemed to have sensed something. His silhouette flickered, and he directly sprinted towards Nye Tian's group. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian felt an incomparably powerful psychic pressure appear and directly descend upon his divine sense. Immediately after, a terrifying force burst out, trying to take control of his divine sense. Nye Tian immediately reacted. The other party actually wanted to control his divine sense. Wishful thinking. Nye Tian no longer concealed himself. With a roar of rage, the holographic divine runes were released even more violently. A powerful burst of mental energy was released, forcefully blocking the invading mental energy, and even rebounding it back. Nie Tian's holographic divine rune was a mental-type divine rune. It was a powerful divine rune that could sense everything in the world. In addition to his peak-level mental energy and extremely strong willpower, how could he be controlled by others? In the next instant, an astonished voice rang out in the air, after which a black-robed silhouette appeared. Her entire face was hidden in a black robe, and her entire body was shrouded in a black aura. Oh, you can actually resist my soul-absorbing devil imprint. Interesting. The eyes of that person flickered with a strange coldness. A cold voice rang out. It was actually a woman. Someone from Ni Lin. Nie Tian's gaze slightly sank. Looking at the silhouette in front of him, he immediately determined that this person was someone from Ni Lin. Although he didn't have much understanding of Ni Lin, he had already seen someone from Ni Lin before. That person was dressed the same way as this woman in front of him. Not only that, he also had the same aura. You can be considered smart. Unfortunately, you're too unlucky to have met me, your elder sister, the black-robed woman said indifferently. Her voice was filled with ridicule. She was very surprised. Within Nie Tian's divine sense, there seemed to be an extremely terrifying type of divine rune that could actually resist her soul-absorbing devil imprint. The soul-absorbing devil imprint was a type of spiritual seal that could instantly control a person's mind. Looks like the person who secretly controlled Lady Zhao Qian back at the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion was you. Nie Tianling replied coldly. He subconsciously looked at Cher and Ed. If Cher and Ed were suddenly controlled by this black-robed woman, it would be extremely terrifying. Nie Tian had the holographic divine rune and could resist the soul-absorbing devil imprint. However, it didn't mean that Cher and Ed could also resist the soul-absorbing devil imprint. There was no need to mention Cher's strength. Ed was able to block Zhao Qian's arrow with his bare hands. His strength was also very strange. If either one of them was controlled by this black-robed woman, it would be extremely terrifying. That's me, your elder sister. The black-robed woman laughed. She appeared to be playful and contemptuous. Who asked you to be so careless? You even dared to casually reveal the Sovereign Dragon Pulse. Sovereign Dragon Pulse? Nie Tian frowned. He had already vaguely guessed that the black-robed woman was here for the Sovereign Dragon Pulse. Previously, when he was fighting with Zheng Kaiqiao, he had no choice but to use the Sovereign Dragon Pulse. In just a split second, he had been targeted by the people of Ni Lin. Ni Lin was indeed an organization that was as famous as the nets above snares below. Are all the people of Ni Lin such robbers? They want to take other people's things for themselves. Nie Tian became cold and sneered. In his heart, he was thinking about how to get rid of this woman. He didn't know how strong this woman was. If she was like the black-robed man, a high god expert, it would be terrible. I don't know about the others, but I'm only interested in valuable things. The black-robed woman laughed. Her charming voice was so soft that it could make a normal man's bones numb. Humph. Nie Tianling laughed but didn't comment. Chapter 1423. Seeing the black-robed woman walking towards him, Nie Tian couldn't help but become nervous. Nie Tian, Schwer said, glancing at Nie Tian. Clearly, she was asking if she could help. Nie Tian shook his head slightly. He wouldn't allow Cher to intervene unless it was a matter of life and death. Little fellow, be obedient and accept your death. Let this elder sister obtain the mental divine imprint in your divine sense. Who knows, if this elder sister is happy, I might even release the two people beside you. The black-robed maiden's voice was soft and alluring, causing one's heart to be in chaos. Don't even think about it. Nie Tian let out a bellow. Without any hesitation, he thrust his heaven-sword forward, unleashing his immense sword intent and star power. In the next moment, sword light burst forth, and a 1,000-meter-long sword shadow whizzed out towards the black-robed woman like a lofty mountain. You're just an early-stage low god and you want to resist? You're overestimating yourself. The black-robed woman sneered. Her body shook slightly and a pair of paper-thin golden wings appeared on her back. The golden wings looked delicate and fragile, but there were dark golden divine crests surging on them. Suddenly, the wings closed and sank. A beam of golden light gushed out with great momentum. Rumble! In the void, a muffled sound rang out as the two forces collided. Shock waves rolled out, and the ground within a radius of several thousand meters was rolled up. Mountain rocks shattered, and trees were uprooted and thrown into the air. Nietian felt a violent force pressing down on him, forcing him to retreat repeatedly. His entire body's aura surged, and only then did he manage to stabilize himself. Little fella, be careful of the people beside you. At this moment, the black-robed woman let out a cold and charming laugh. Nietian frowned and immediately became cautious. He scanned Cher and Ed with his consciousness. At this moment, he suddenly felt an enormous spiritual deterrence descending on him. The target was Cher. Cher, watch out! Nietian felt something was wrong and cried out. The woman in black wanted to control Cher. Cher's beautiful eyes flickered. She seemed to have sensed something, but her expression remained calm. In the next moment, the domineering spiritual deterrence swept past Snow's body and entered her body. Oh no! Nietian's heart sank when he sensed this, and his face turned pale. If Cher was controlled by the black-clothed woman, even if he and Ed joined forces, they might not be a match for Cher. Little guy, this little girl's sword Dao realm is very high. She's already a sword-bone swordsman. Will you be her match? When the black-robed woman saw that her divine soul devil seal had entered Cher's body, she couldn't help but sneer. Victory was already in her grasp. But then, a strange scene happened. Then are you my opponent? Cher stood at the same spot, her beautiful eyes sparkling like gems, without the slightest change, sparkling like snow and clear like water. The black-clothed woman was stunned for a moment, but then she understood. Under the black robe, her eyes flickered with astonishment. She cried out in disbelief, "How is this possible? You're not afraid of my soul-grasping devil seal?" She clearly sensed that the soul-grasping devil seal was absorbed by Cher's consciousness, but the latter was not controlled by her at all. Instead, her eyes were clear as usual. How was this possible? The soul-grasping devil seal that the black-clothed woman was always proud of had failed on two people on the same day. Moreover, both of them were only at the early stage of lower god. She couldn't accept this for a moment. "Schwerer, you're all right." Nietian immediately came to his senses and shouted in pleasant surprise. But then he felt relieved. When Cher fought against Duguanai, she completely ignored the latter's 100 virtual body. Now, it was not strange that she could ignore the black-clothed woman's soul-grasping devil seal. Cher's bloodline was too powerful. It was simply unimaginable. What kind of Yuan meridian was the 3 lives meridian? Nietian relied on the holographic divine glyph to resist the soul-grasping devil seal. Moreover, it was only under extreme resistance that he was able to resist the control of the soul-grasping devil seal. But Snow, on the other hand, completely disregarded it. This was simply too terrifying. Although Nietian and Cher were now together day and night, in his eyes, Cher was more and more like a mystery. "I'm fine." Cher's little face smiled delightedly. She didn't even know that she had resisted the soul-grasping devil seal. She only felt her consciousness tremble slightly, and then nothing else. "Damn it!" the black-clothed woman screamed. Only now did she realize that these people in front of her were very difficult to deal with. Then, she suddenly turned around, looked at Ed not far away, and let out a sinister laugh. An even more terrifying spiritual deterrence was released, enveloping Ed. Nietian felt a spiritual fluctuation in the air and immediately reacted. He cried out in alarm, but it was already too late. Ed was stunned for a moment and frowned slightly. In the next moment, his expression completely changed. From an innocent young man, he turned into a violent, bloodthirsty, and ferocious face. Nie Tian and Cher could resist the soul-grasping devil seal, but Ed couldn't. Kill them! The black-clothed woman laughed. She looked at Ed and said coldly, "Roar!" Like a ferocious beast, Edie's eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body emitted a violent aura. He suddenly looked at Nie Tian. Oh no! Nie Tian's heart sank, and his expression suddenly changed. Ed was still controlled by the black-clothed woman. Boom! Edie's silhouette moved, and a simple punch was thrown out. Instantly, a shadow of a fist whizzed out, pressing down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned, and he didn't dare to be careless. Meteor wings appeared behind him, and he flapped them, dodging the fist's attack head-on. At the same time, he slashed out with his sword. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of sword shadows covered the sky, rushing towards Ed. Nie Tian knew how strong Edie's physical body was, so he didn't dare to fight it head-on. At the same time, he didn't dare to use moves that were too strong, in case he hurt Ed. Bang bang bang! Countless muffled sounds came out in the air. Under the continuous attack of the sword shadows, the fist shadow suddenly shattered. Roar! However, this scene caused Ed to be even more furious. He roared furiously as his entire body actually underwent a terrifying change. A pair of black horns grew out from his forehead, his body expanded explosively by a few times, and black scales appeared all over his body. Moreover, his hands and feet had transformed into enormous sharp claws. Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but be shocked. Ed actually turned into a dragon. This was the real dragon transformation, and his body turned into the body of a divine dragon. But looking at Edie's current state, his body couldn't completely turn into a dragon. He could only maintain the state of half-dragon and half-human. Divine dragon bloodline! The next moment, Nie Tian immediately understood and exclaimed. At this moment, he finally understood why Edie's physical body was so strong. It turned out that he was actually one of the legendary 4 spiritual bloodlines, Divine Dragon Bloodline. 4 spiritual bloodlines. Divine Dragon Bloodline, Phoenix Bloodline, Kirin Bloodline, and Heavenly Tiger Bloodline. Nie Tian had seen people with 4 spiritual bloodlines in the plain world. Nangong Ba with Kirin Bloodline and Chen Tianla with Heavenly Tiger Bloodline. However, compared to Ed, the purity of their bloodlines was far inferior. Nangong Ba and Chen Tianla could only use their bloodlines to condense the shadows of Kirin and Heavenly Tiger. Chapter 1424. The Divine Dragon bloodline in Edie's body had a very high concentration of bloodline. It practically spread throughout the meridians in his body, fusing as one with his body. I actually did not see through that he has Divine Dragon bloodline previously. Elder Ming must have left something on his body that can conceal the Divine Dragon bloodline. Nie Tian was puzzled and guessed. Such a strong 4-spirit bloodline, it was Nie Tian's first time seeing it. No wonder the demonic Dragon King would take Ed as a disciple. It turned out that the latter's talent was actually so terrifying. At this time, Nie Tian could also tell that Edie's strength was peak 9th level Heavenly Emperor and had not reached the deity realm. Not even at the deity realm, and could actually forcefully receive Zhao Qian's arrow. The toughness of Edie's physical body made one's hair stand on end. At this time, the woman in black seemed to have discovered something too and could not help exclaiming, "This boy actually has the legendary Divine Dragon bloodline. Furthermore, it's so powerful." The woman in black originally came for Nie Tian. She did not expect to actually encounter another person with Divine Dragon bloodline. How could she not be delighted? Supreme Dragon bloodline, Spirit Divine Vein, plus Divine Dragon bloodline, the woman in black discovered 3 things that interested her all at once. This nearly drove her crazy. "I didn't expect that heaven still cares for me, Rinjin-chan." The woman in black laughed excitedly, the eyes under the black robe shining with light. Renjin-chan, that was her name. Roar! At this time, Edi's dragonization already ended. His body reached 5 to 6 meters tall, covered in scales all over, looking indestructible. Berserk dragon chi was released all over his body. A furious roar already had some momentum of a dragon's roar. Crap! Nietion's brows furrowed. He could sense that the current Edi's combat strength was absolutely not beneath peak lesser deity martial artist. Divine dragon bloodline was indeed very powerful. Kill him! Renjin-chan roared once more, her voice becoming sharp and ear-piercing. At this time, she already became fanatical. She must take possession of the supreme dragon bloodline, divine dragon bloodline, and spirit divine vein for herself. Rumble! Ed instantly attacked, a huge punch blasting out. A dragon-shaped phantom actually appeared in the void, 1,000 meters in size, roaring and pressing over towards Nietion. Nietion, watch out! Cher screamed when she saw this. Nietion's brows sank. He lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and moved agilely, avoiding the dragon shadow's frontal attack. However, he was still affected by the aftershock. A thin wound appeared on his body, but it healed in an instant. What a terrifying power! Nietion steadied himself and stared at Ed with a burning gaze. His eyes were filled with astonishment. If he had been hit head-on by that punch just now, even someone as strong as Nietion would have been injured. Nietion found it strange in his heart. Even if Ed had divine dragon bloodline, his strength was only peak heavenly emperor. He shouldn't have such formidable strength. There had to be something even more powerful in Edie's body. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so terrifying. Why is this brat's divine dragon bloodline so strong? Renjin-chan said with a frown, having also noticed that something was amiss. Boom! Boom! At this time, Ed attacked again. 2 dragon shadows appeared at the same time and attacked Nietion, leaving him with no way to retreat. Nietion's eyes darkened slightly. Then, his whole body surged with wild sword momentum. Blood-colored runes appeared under his feet. One of the 3 major sword formations of the AO sword skill, the Sword Seal Forbidden Formation, was activated. Blood-colored sword intent instantly condensed. Sword Dragon devours the world! Nietion roared and slashed out with his sword. A dragon of sword intent appeared and collided with a dragon shadow. There was a loud explosion in the void. The 2 giant dragons collapsed directly, and the dragon chi and sword intent wreaked havoc in the air. Upon seeing this, Nietion's figure flickered, and he dashed out, narrowly avoiding the fatal blow. The wings behind him moved and stabilized his body. He looked at Ed in horror, and his expression was incomparably astonished. Edie's strength far exceeded his expectations. If he continued to be so timid, he was afraid that it would be somewhat dangerous. With Nietion's current strength, if he used a killing move, it was very likely that he would hurt Ed. This was not what he wanted to see. At this moment, Nietion suddenly noticed that the dragon chi around Ed not only did not weaken, but it became more and more intense. It was very strange. What's going on? Nietion felt strange. Ed had used a series of ruthless moves, but the dragon chi not only did not weaken, but it became stronger. How could this be possible? Oh no! The next moment, Nietion suddenly saw that in the scales around Edie's body, there was a layer of faint blood chi. His heart suddenly sank and his expression changed. Ed was actually burning all the blood chi in his body to maximize the power of the divine dragon's bloodline. I must stop him. Nietion roared in his heart. If Ed continued to be controlled, the burning of blood chi could not be stopped. It would not be long before his blood chi was exhausted and he died. Realizing this, Nietion no longer hesitated. He suddenly looked at Cher and said in a deep voice, "Cher, do it?" Cher nodded heavily. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Rinjin-chan was slightly stunned. She then glanced at Cher and smiled disdainfully. She said, "A mere early-stage low-god wants to fight me?" Rinjin-chan had never seen Cher in action. Of course, she did not know how strong Cher was. However, she was at the peak of the low-god realm. She would not take Cher seriously. "You'll know after you try." Cher smiled faintly. Then, she moved and a crimson long sword appeared in her hand. This sword was condensed from her Wan Jian bloodline. It was equivalent to her sword spirit. It was called the Fallen God. Rin Jinchan looked at the Fallen God in Cher's hand and felt a powerful sword essence. She could not help but cry out in surprise. She obviously did not expect Cher's sword essence to be so powerful. Such a powerful sword essence coupled with the sword bones realm of swordsmanship was extremely terrifying. Thinking of this, Rinjin-chan could not help but tremble. Her face under the black robe was somewhat frightened. "I will defeat you with one sword." Cher raised the fallen god in her hand. She smiled faintly. Her body stood in the air like a long sword, as if it could tear everything apart. Arrogant! Rinjin-chan dared not look down on Cher anymore. However, she was not to be outdone. She let out a roar and moved. A pair of golden wings appeared on her back. In an instant, the wings grew to 1,000 meters long and shone with golden light. Godly slaying! Shui-er didn't even bother to look at Rinjin-chan. She murmured softly as she struck out with her sword. Her sword intent shook the heavens, and a crimson sword shadow that was as red as blood whistled through the air. Cher's speed was extremely fast. Rinjin-chan was stunned for a moment. Then, she folded her wings and a golden ray shot out. Boom! However, the golden light could not withstand a single blow from Shui-er's domineering sword will. It was directly shattered, and the murderous sword shadow was like a deadly red caltrop. No! Rinjin-chan sensed that something was wrong. She screamed, but it was too late. Bang! Rinjin-chan's figure was sent flying. She drew a dazzling trail of blood in the air. Sakura once said that Cher's current battle strength was between the peak of mid-god and early-stage high-god. Rinjin-chan only had the strength of a low-god. Moreover, her trump card, the soul-absorbing seal, was useless against Cher. Under such circumstances, how could she be a match for Cher? Chapter 1425. Just when Rinjin-chan was sent flying by Cher's attack, a deep voice rang out. A figure appeared and caught Rinjin-chan. Cher hovered in the air. When she saw the person who had suddenly appeared, her eyes could not help but flicker. She was surprised. She had never thought that someone would actually appear at a time like this and save Rinjin-chan. Jin-chan! The newcomer hugged Rinjin-chan and let out a furious roar. His white hair fluttered in the air and his handsome face became ferocious. A violent aura was released from his body and turned into surging waves of air. Like a huge ripple, it spread out in the void. Cher felt the pressure of the powerful presence. She was actually unable to endure it, and she could not help but stagger backwards. What a powerful presence! Nietion frowned. He looked at the white-haired person, and his eyes could not help but tremble. The person's presence was extremely powerful. It was no weaker than Qi Yefeng, Dugu Lingtian, and the others. However, the person was much younger than Qi Yefeng and Dugu Lingtian. Although he had white hair, his appearance was very young. He seemed like a young man, probably only a few centuries old. He had actually reached the level of overgods at such a young age. His talent for martial arts was truly rare. By now, Ed had already returned to his normal state. However, he had consumed too much of his dragon aura and flesh aura, causing him to pass out. Nietion caught him, then turned to Shui-er and shouted, "Shui-er, come back here." The person was just too powerful. Even Cher was not his opponent. Cher glanced at Nietion as if she was thinking about something. She actually said to the person, "Don't worry. She's not dead. She's just fainted. Your blood is very confused and in pain. It must be because of her, right? The person suddenly became stunned. He raised his head to look at Cher, and his gaze became strange. His face trembled, and he was momentarily at a loss for words. Cher nodded slightly and said, "There's no killing intent in your blood, but there's great fury. You're filled with regret for what you've done in the past, right?" "Enough. Say no more." The black-robed man suddenly roared and crazily shouted, "You astrologers! Do you think you can casually comment on other people's past just because you can predict some things? There are some things that you will never understand if you haven't experienced it yourself." Astrologer, the man in black thought that Cher was an astrologer. It was rumored that astrologers were able to predict the past and the future. In the plainer world, astrologers were called diviners, but there were very few of them. It was rumored that they needed to be extremely talented, and their souls could communicate with the great Tao of heaven and earth in order to see the trends of heaven and earth. For example, Elder Tsang Yu of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace's Stargazing Hall was an astrologer. However, his prophetic abilities were very weak, and he could only construct a stargazing array. Cher just glanced at the man in black and said so much. It was not surprising that the man thought she was an astrologer. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes. It seemed that Cher was right about the man in black. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so angry. At this time, Nie Tian finally believed that Cher did have a very strange method to sniff something out from a cultivator's blood. "Take her with you." Shui-er looked at the black-robed man intently and said calmly. The man in black frowned and sensed Rin Jinchan's aura. Although it was a little weak, it was very stable, and there was no danger to her life. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Cher and said, "Thank you for showing mercy." With the man in black's strength, he could naturally see that Cher did not use her full strength in that sword strike. Otherwise, Rin Jinchan would definitely die on the spot. Moreover, he could see that Cher's eyes were very clear and pure like an angel's. This was absolutely impossible to fake. Cher did not want to hurt anyone, nor did she want to kill anyone. She would only make a move when Nie Tian was in danger. Even when facing someone like Duguanai, who killed his master, she did not kill him. It could be seen that she had a kind heart. Nie Tian let out a long breath and his expression became much more relaxed. Fortunately, the person who made a move was Cher. If it was Nie Tian's people, with his personality, he would definitely kill Rin Jinchan. This woman secretly controlled Zhao Qian to make a move. It was really vicious. If Rin Jinchan died, this man in black would definitely not let it go. The man in black carried Rin Jinchan and turned to leave. However, he hesitated and finally said, "I am Lord Heartbroken. You did not kill her, so I owe you a favor. If there is a chance to meet in the future, I will return this favor to you." After Lord Heartbroken finished speaking, he did not stay any longer. His figure moved and he directly left with Rin Jinchan. Sigh. What a pitiful person. Shui-er looked in the direction the Heartbroken Breaker Prince and Rin Jinchan had disappeared in and sighed softly. There was a look of disappointment on her delicate face. Young Master Heartbroken? Nie Tian was taken aback. He muttered, "What a strange name." This Lord Heartbroken was not a bad person. There must be an unforgettable story between him and Rin Jinchan. "Nie Tian, how is Ed?" Cher landed and came to Nie Tian's side. Seeing that Ed was still unconscious, she couldn't help but ask worriedly. Nie Tian looked at the skinny Ed and shook his head. It was hard to believe that this skinny young man's body actually contained such terrifying power. Nie Tian guessed that in Edi's body, other than the powerful divine dragon bloodline, there must be other powers. That power was even more terrifying than the divine dragon bloodline. He should be fine. He just used up too much blood qi and is temporarily unconscious. Let's hurry back to the demon dragon city. Nie Tian faintly smiled. Then, the will of meteors appeared behind him, and he placed Ed on his back. He and Cher did not delay and immediately set off for the demon dragon city. On this trip to the Medicine King Elixir Pavilion, Nie Tian encountered many strong opponents, such as Xing Kaiqiao and Rin Jinchan. He urgently realized that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Xing Kaiqiao was considered a peerless genius in the Medicine King Divine Palace, but in the 12 shrines, he was definitely not the best. Nie Tian's next step was to participate in the 12 shrines competition for the lower deities. It was evident how difficult it was. Half a day later, Nie Tian and Cher returned to the Demon Dragon City and quickly arrived at the place where Ming Hui lived. Nie Tian, you're back. Ming Hui had the demon fire diagram and was already waiting for Nie Tian and the others outside. Elder Ming, Nie Tian stepped forward and handed Ed to Ming Hui. He said, Ed is slightly injured. Ming Hui's face darkened and he seemed very nervous. He stepped forward to sense Edie's condition and was relieved after confirming that he was fine. Then, Ming Hui brought Nie Tian and the others into the space created by the boundary of the universe. Nie Tian and Cher waited in the main hall of the hut while Ming Hui brought Ed into the inner hall to check on his injuries. After a while, Ming Hui walked out of the inner hall. His face was a little gloomy and he looked very worried. Elder Ming, is Ed all right? Nie Tian's expression changed when he saw Ming Hui's expression, and he asked nervously. Chapter 1426. Ed is fine, but I'm afraid his future path will be very difficult. Ming Hui let out a long sigh and squeezed out a smile. I am his teacher, but I can't accompany him for a lifetime. He has to walk his own path in the future. Ming Hui's expression changed as he spoke. He seemed to remember many things. Elder Ming, besides the divine dragon bloodline, is there something more powerful in Edi's body? Nie Tian nodded slightly. He couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked in a deep voice. You already know about Edi's divine dragon bloodline? Ming Hui was stunned and somewhat surprised. Nie Tian didn't hide it and immediately told him about Edi's injury. I see. Ming Hui frowned and murmured, no wonder the power in his body can't be suppressed anymore. It was stimulated by the soul-absorbing demon seal. What do you mean? Nie Tian listened to Ming Hui's words and was even more confused. It seemed that Edi's divine dragon bloodline wasn't revealed before because Ming Hui used a special method to suppress it. Ai. Ming Hui let out a long sigh and said, Ed was originally an orphan. I saw that he had divine dragon bloodline, so I took him in as a disciple. Actually, I took him as a disciple with a very strong selfish motive. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, waiting for Ming Hui to continue. At this time, Ming Hui couldn't hide it anymore and said, I really can't accept the destruction of the Demon Dragon clan. And in recent years, I feel that the boundary of the internal universe can't be suppressed anymore. My lifespan is coming to an end, so I need to find an heir. Ed has a very powerful divine dragon bloodline, so you found him to be your heir. Nie Tian's gaze trembled as he said. Ming Hui had always blamed himself for the destruction of the Demon Dragon clan. It wasn't strange for him to have such thoughts. Yes. Ming Hui nodded heavily and said, I want to find an heir to inherit the position of the Demon Dragon King and find a way to revive the Demon Dragon clan. Ed has an extremely strong divine dragon bloodline. It's the only one I've seen in my life, so he's the best heir. And then? Nie Tian was much calmer. He still didn't know what Ming Hui had done to Ed. The Demon Dragon clan has a sacred item that has been passed down from generation to generation. The person who possesses the Demon Dragon's sacred relic will be the new Demon Dragon King. Ingrui's expression changed slightly, and his voice trembled slightly. You gave the Devil Dragon's sacred object to Ed. Nie Tian was stunned and cried out in surprise. Although the demonic dragon tribe and the primordial dragon tribe were slightly weaker than the golden colossal dragon tribe, they were still far more powerful than ordinary tribes. Ed possessed the sacred treasure of the Devil Dragon clan. It was no wonder that his physical body and strength were so terrifying. However, Nye Tian was very curious about the demonic dragon race's sacred relic. Yes. Ming Hui nodded slightly, his eyes trembling. Clearly, he was recalling something. He said, "When I met Ed, he was only 2 or 3 years old. It was at that time that I fused the sacred treasure of the Demon Dragon clan, the Demon Dragon's heart, into his body." Demon Dragon's heart. Hearing these words, Nye Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble. Although he didn't quite understand what the Demon Dragon's heart represented, since it could become the sacred treasure of the Demon Dragon clan, it must contain extremely terrifying power. The Demon Dragon's heart is the sacred treasure of the Demon Dragon clan passed down from generation to generation. Legend has it that if the Demon Dragon's heart is completely fused into one's body, one can transform into the ultimate Demon Dragon body. That kind of power is even more terrifying than the golden colossal dragon. Ming Hui nodded and said, "Unfortunately, the Demon Dragon's heart is passed down from generation to generation. The Demon Dragon King changes owners every 10,000 years, but no one has ever been able to condense the ultimate Demon Dragon body. I have possessed the Demon Dragon's heart for hundreds of thousands of years, but I still can't completely release the terrifying power inside. Ed has the Divine Dragon's bloodline. If he can fuse the Divine Dragon's bloodline with the Demon Dragon's heart, perhaps he can stimulate the Demon Dragon's heart's ultimate power." As Ming Hui spoke, his eyes couldn't help but have strong expectations. He said, "This is the first time the Demon Dragon's heart has been fused into a human's body. So that's how it is." Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he listened. He nodded slightly. No wonder Ed was so terrifying. He was only in the Heavenly Emperor realm, but he was able to fight against Nye Tian, who had the battle power of a peak lower deity. It turned out that he had fused with such an abnormal demon dragon's heart. The ultimate demon dragon body was an existence even more terrifying than the golden colossal dragon. His battle power was probably close to or even surpassing that of a peak godly state expert. It was possible that he could rival a sage. Elder Ming, Ed fused with the demon dragon's heart. This shouldn't be a bad thing for him, right? Nye Tian became cold and asked with a frown. The demon dragon's heart was the sacred treasure of the Demon Dragon clan. Perhaps anyone would want to obtain it. Ming Hui gave the demon dragon's heart to Ed, so why did he feel so guilty? Ming Hui shook his head and said, "The power of the demon dragon's heart is indeed terrifying, but it also has a huge backlash. While the demon dragon's heart provides great power to a martial artist, it also constantly absorbs the martial artist's blood. Ed is already 18 years old. Moreover, he has the divine dragon's bloodline in his body, but his body is very lean. This is due to the influence of the demon dragon's heart. If he didn't have the divine dragon's bloodline, it would be impossible for him to fuse with the demon dragon's heart." Nye Tian frowned and the corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Ming Hui's body was also incomparably lean. This was probably also due to the influence of the demon dragon's heart. Because of the backlash of the demon dragon's heart, a martial artist who possesses the demon dragon's heart can only live half of a martial artist of the same level, or even less. The reason why I can live until now is because of the boundary of the internal universe. Ming Hui shook his head and said, "I was indeed too selfish to forcefully fuse the demon dragon's heart into Edie's body. With his talent, even without the demon dragon's heart, he still has the chance to reach the peak of the godly state." Nye Tian let out a long sigh of turbid air. There was some helplessness on his face. Back then, Ed was only a 2 or 3 years old child. He indeed didn't have the right to choose. But living in this world, how many people could truly choose everything? Even Nye Tian would sometimes be forced to make a compromise choice. Previously, I used the demon dragon's soul to help Ed suppress the demon dragon's heart. But now that the demon dragon's heart has been stimulated by the soul-absorbing fiend seal, It can't be suppressed anymore. In the future, ED will suffer the backlash of the demon dragon's heart at all times, Ming Hui said with a pained expression. He seemed to be doubting whether it was right or wrong for him to fuse the demon dragon's heart into Edie's body back then. Elder Ming, don't worry too much. I believe that ED will definitely be able to walk his own path in the future. He definitely won't let you down. Nie Tian nodded slightly and comforted Ming Hui. I hope so. Ming Hui nodded solemnly and forced out a smile. Nie Tian waited until Ming Hui calmed down a lot before he suddenly thought of something and asked, Elder Ming, you just said that the soul-absorbing fiend seal stimulated the power of the demon dragon's heart. Is the soul-absorbing fiend seal very scary? Listening to Ming Hui's words, the soul-absorbing fiend seal seemed to be very scary. But Nie Tian didn't feel much threat from Ren Jinshan. The soul-absorbing fiend seal is one of the 8 great ancient evil seals. Of course it's very scary. Ming Hui's brows furrowed, and then his expression changed slightly. He said, I also didn't think that you guys would actually encounter someone who possesses the soul-absorbing fiend seal. 8 great ancient evil seals? Hearing this name, Nie Tian frowned and had a puzzled look. Chapter 14:27. Nie Tian had never heard of the 8 great ancient evil seals before, so he was very curious. The 8 great primordial evil seals refer to the 8 extremely and evil seals that appeared during the Great War of Gods and Demons. Rumor has it that the power of the 8 great evil seals isn't any weaker than the 10 great ultimate seals. Some of the seals are even the nemesis of the 10 great ultimate seals. Ming Hui nodded solemnly. Thinking of the soul-grasping demon seal that Nie Tian and the others had encountered, he said, the martial artist that you encountered with the soul-grasping demon seal did not display the full power of the soul-grasping demon seal. At this point, Ming Hui couldn't help but look at Cher. He frowned and said, if the soul-absorbing demon seal's power is truly unleashed, even she would find it hard to resist. Nie Tian's gaze sank slightly, and then he realized that Ming Hui really noticed something on Cher, but he just didn't say it. However, looking at Ming Hui's appearance, he obviously didn't intend to reveal Cher's identity to Nie Tian. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept his mouth shut. Ming Hui nodded slightly and continued, the soul-absorbing demon seal is, after all, an ancient evil seal. The cultivation method has already been lost. The woman you saw could only do simple soul control. If the power of the soul-absorbing demon seal is unleashed, not only can she control souls, she can even merge souls and take them. Soul fusion and soul search? Nie Tian was stunned again, not quite understanding what Ming Hui meant. The corner of Ming Hui's mouth twitched as he said, soul fusion is to integrate the souls of other martial artists into the soul-grasping demon seal. Soul-grasping is to directly refine the power of other martial artists with the soul-grasping demon seal to increase one's own strength. This is an extremely evil method. It is rumored that it does not have many side effects, but it can allow those who possess the soul-absorbing devil mark to rapidly increase their strength. Directly integrating and refining the strength of other warriors, this is too terrifying. Nie Tian could not help but click his tongue when he heard this. The grasping soul demon seal was indeed terrifying. It was even stronger than the devouring attribute. If Ren Jinshan knew how to merge souls and take souls, she would have been able to directly merge the powers of ED. After all, there weren't many people who could resist the soul-assimilating demon seal. Looks like I've underestimated the soul-absorbing demon seal. Nie Tian could not help but frown as he thought to himself. Fortunately, Ren Jinshan did not know how to unleash the power of the absorbing soul devil seal. Otherwise, Nie Tian and the others would not be able to escape. Elder Ming, have you heard of the name Heartbroken Young Master? Nie Tian suddenly thought of the heartbroken young master who'd rescued Ren Jinshan, and he couldn't help but ask. No. Ming Hui shook his head and said, who is this person? It's nothing. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "He was the one who rescued the soul-absorbing demon seal martial artist." Elder Ming, how much do you know about the inescapable net? Nie Tian thought of Cher and asked. Until now, he still didn't understand why the inescapable net would suddenly be so interested in Cher, to the point of offering her the position of princess. Ming Hui obviously wouldn't tell Nie Tian about Cher's identity. Perhaps he knew something about the inescapable net. The inescapable net? Ming Hui was slightly stunned. He thought for a moment and said, "This is the most mysterious organization in the 9 major realms. Rumor has it that its strength is comparable to the peak forces of the upper realm. On the surface, the inescapable net is an organization that sells information, but no one knows the real purpose of its establishment. Some people say that the biggest secret of the inescapable net is in the gate of the net. If you want to investigate the inescapable net, it's best to ask those who have entered the gate of the net." The gate of the net. Nie Tian's face darkened when he heard these words. The gate of the net was the reason why the inescapable net was so terrifying. Most of the people who made deals with the inescapable net died in the gate of the net. Dugu Lingtian had asked Nie Tian to increase his strength to the high god realm before entering the gate of the net because he was afraid that Nie Tian would die in the gate of the net. What secret is hidden in the gate of the net? Nie Tian murmured in his heart and his face darkened slightly. After a while, his expression returned to normal. The most important thing now was to fuse with the boundary of the universe. It was useless to think too much about the inescapable net and Cher. Then, Nie Tian told Ming Hui that he could only get the ice element high god divine spark after 2 or 3 days, so he had to wait another 2 or 3 days before he could fuse with the first devilish fire. Ming Hui did not mind. Moreover, the timing was just right. He could use these few days to refine the heaven and earth fusion formation. If he wanted Nie Tian to successfully fuse with the boundary of the universe, he had to do it in the heaven and earth fusion formation. Nie Tian left the great hall and went to the room that Ming Hui had arranged for him with Cher. After talking with Cher for a while, Nie Tian went to the world outside the thatched cottage alone. What a magical world! Nie Tian could not help but exclaim as he looked around. Of course, he knew that the world here was created by the boundary of the universe. However, all of this was very real and no different from the outside world. The boundary of the universe was just as the rumors said. It contained the power of creation. Soon, Nie Tian came to a lush forest. After examining the surroundings, he smiled and said, "This is the place. The divine intent energy in the space is not bad." As he spoke, Nie Tian sat cross-legged and quickly entered a state of cultivation. The battle with Xing Kai Qiao had deepened Nie Tian's understanding of sword patterns. Therefore, he wanted to make use of these 2 days to break through to a higher realm of swordsmanship. The improvement of his swordsmanship realm was enough to further improve his strength. At this moment, Nie Tian was strong enough to fight against a peak low god expert. If he improved his swordsmanship realm, he was confident that he could fight a mid-god like Zhang Qinzong head-on. Nie Tian focused all his attention and carefully sensed the sword intent in his body. The 9 extremities war god art slowly circulated and his body began to slowly absorb the divine intent energy in the space. As he continued to absorb the divine intent energy, Nie Tian felt all the pores on his body open up. He felt an indescribable sense of comfort. At the same time, the sword intent in his body also gradually changed. The sword intent turned into whirlpools and surged in his body. Nie Tian carefully sensed the changes in the sword intent. The network of sword patterns reverberated in his mind. He operated his divine sense and accelerated the transformation of sword intent and sword patterns. After an unknown amount of time, he finally sensed that the sword intent whirlpools began to gradually produce fine runes. Although they were small, they were extremely complicated and contained an even more violent sword aura. Sword pattern. Nie Tian cried out in surprise. He immediately understood that he had finally condensed sword patterns. Following that, more sword-intent whirlpools began to become violent as though they were boiling. Intricate and complicated sword patterns began to form and gush out from the sword-intent whirlpools. They circulated in the meridians of Nie Tian's body. At this moment, Nie Tian felt that all the meridians, bones, and blood in his body were undergoing extremely strange changes. Under the effect of the sword patterns, his martial body was greatly strengthened. All the meridians, bones, and blood in his body were wrapped by the sword patterns, becoming more stable and intricate. Gradually, Nie Tian felt that his whole body was filled with sword patterns. The power in his body rose sharply in an instant. Chapter 1428. In the dense forest, a sword momentum rose from the ground like a heavenly pillar, turning into a sharp sword that seemed to have the power to tear apart heaven and earth. Boom! The next moment, the surging sword intent erupted and spread in all directions, like a broken dam. Suddenly, everything within 1,000 meters was razed to the ground. Rocks crumbled and trees fell to the ground. It was a complete mess. The power of the sword pattern is so strong. Nie Tian stood up and looked around and couldn't help but exclaim. Everything in front of him was just the sword momentum that he subconsciously released, but it had such power. It was really powerful. After a while, Nie Tian became cold. He looked inside his body, and was surprised to find that there were countless runes surging inside his body. They were the sword patterns formed by the sword ultimacy. The sword patterns enveloped the meridians, bones, and even the blood and nerves of a warrior. It was a qualitative improvement to the warrior's martial body. Nie Tian could feel that his martial body was almost twice as strong under the support of the sword patterns. The sword principle of the spirit realm and the sword principle of the god realm were different. The sword principle of the spirit realm was the sword principle of the soul, which cultivated the sword will and sword soul. The sword principle of the god realm was the sword principle of the martial body. The sword will and sword soul were integrated into the martial body, becoming one with the warrior. In short, the sword principle realm below the sword ultimacy strengthened the sword will and sword soul, while the sword principle realm above the sword pattern strengthened the warrior's martial body. Nie Tian was only at the sword pattern realm. When he advanced to the sword vein realm or the sword bone realm, his martial vein and bones would be filled with powerful sword principle, and his martial body would be strengthened again. And when he reached the legendary sword martial unity realm, it would be the true fusion of the sword principle and the martial body. I am the sword, and the sword is me. Nie Tian still had a long way to go before he could fuse sword and martial arts as one, so he could only hope for it. Huh! The next moment, Nie Tian immediately discovered a surprise. His demonic aura had become bigger and more violent than before. The power it contained was also more powerful. The improvement of the sword principle realm has also improved my strength. I have actually reached the middle stage low god realm. Nie Tian immediately understood and murmured. It hadn't been long since he had condensed his demonic essence. It had only been 10 days or so, but his strength had actually risen once more. This was just too terrifying. After all, under normal circumstances, it would take a god realm martial artist 10,000 years to advance to a major realm, and around 1,000 years to advance to a minor realm. Even those monstrous geniuses would need several years, or even decades to advance a small realm. Nie Tian had advanced a level in 10 days. This was too terrifying. However, Nie Tian knew that part of the reason his strength could advance was related to the power of the stars within his body. The last time he had condensed his demonic essence, he had awakened the power of 100 billion stars. Another more important aspect was the improvement of his sword Dao realm. He had the Starry Sky sword array in his body, which perfectly linked his sword Dao realm and martial Dao realm together. The two realms fused and boosted each other. The improvement of one would often greatly boost the other. After understanding this, Nye Tian felt relieved. However, he had to stabilize his cultivation base. After all, the God realm was completely different from the Heavenly Emperor realm. To him, this was a brand new martial arts realm. Big Brother Nye Tian. At this time, a voice sounded. It was Ed. Ed. Nye Tian saw Ed and could not help but smile. Only then did he remember that he had been cultivating hard for several days. Previously, he had been immersed in the joy of advancing his sword Dao realm. Nye Tian did not notice that he had been cultivating hard for several days. At this time, Ed had returned to normal, but his body was still extremely thin. This was the power of the backlash of the demon dragon's heart. It was also something that could not be helped. Seeing that Ed was fine, Nye Tian was very happy. Nye Tian, you condensed a sword pattern? At this time, Ming Hui's figure also appeared. A pair of sharp eyes looked at Nye Tian with a look of amazement. Yes. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said with a smile, I was lucky. What a powerful sword pattern. Ming Hui frowned slightly. His divine sense swept across Nye Tian's body, and his expression was a little astonished. Of course, he knew Nye Tian's talent. To be able to condense a sword pattern in such a short time, it was not just good luck. At this moment, what shocked him was that the sword pattern in Nye Tian's body was very terrifying. It was even more terrifying than some swordsmen who had reached the sword vein realm. Ming Hui had lived for more than 600,000 years and had seen countless swordsmen. However, Nye Tian's sword pattern was the first he had seen in his life. It was no exaggeration to say that Nye Tian's sword pattern was the most powerful among the swordsmen that Ming Hui had seen. One should know that Ming Hui had seen those Sword Dao Grandmaster level figures before. Even those figures might not be Nye Tian's opponent if they suppressed their Sword Dao realm to the sword pattern realm. It's all right. Nye Tian smiled faintly, but he was secretly delighted. He was different from other swordsmen. There were 4 types of sword essences in his body. Hence, he had condensed 4 types of sword patterns. Star's sword pattern, Pride sword pattern, Thunderbolt sword pattern, and Soul Devourer sword pattern. The Star's sword pattern was condensed by the power of the stars, the Pride sword pattern was condensed by the Pride sword technique, the Thunderbolt sword pattern was condensed by the 9-star dragon vein, and the Soul Devourer sword pattern was condensed by the Soul Devourer sword formation. Among the 4 types of sword patterns, Nye Tian could feel that the Star's sword pattern was the strongest, followed by the Soul Devourer sword pattern. The Pride sword pattern was even weaker, and the Thunderbolt sword pattern was the weakest. However, even the weakest Thunderbolt sword pattern was far more terrifying than the sword patterns of ordinary swordsmen. At this moment, Nye Tian was still unable to merge the 4 types of sword patterns. If he could merge the sword patterns, the power would definitely be even more terrifying. After a long time, Ming Hui finally calmed down and his expression gradually returned to normal. He speculated that a casual stroke of Nye Tian's sword was enough to severely injure an ordinary expert at the peak of the lower celestial stage. Nye Tian, 3 days have passed. My heaven and earth fusion formation has been completed. I'm only missing the ice divine spark. You can go to the Heaven Net platform to get the divine spark now. Ming Hui smiled faintly and said to Nye Tian. Alright. Nye Tian's face was full of joy. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Big brother Nye Tian, I'll go with you. Ed took a step forward and chuckled. He also wanted to go and join in the fun. Okay. Nye Tian nodded slightly. Just as he was about to inform Cher, she appeared. I'll go with you. Cher smiled proudly and went to Nye Tian's side like a little elf. She grabbed his arm and acted coquettishly. Nye Tian smiled and nodded slightly. Nye Tian didn't wait any longer and immediately walked out of the independent space at the edge of the universe. After a while, Nye Tian and the others appeared on the main street of the Demon Dragon City. They didn't stop and walked directly to the Heaven Net platform in the center of the city. The forces of the inescapable net covered the 9 domains. Even a city like the Demon Dragon City had a Heaven Net platform. Not long after, Nye Tian and the others arrived at the huge square in the center of the Demon Dragon City. They saw a lot of people gathered at the center of the square, and there was a violent energy being released from the center of the crowd. Someone is fighting. Nye Tian frowned and his eyes trembled slightly. At this moment, 2 figures soared into the sky, each holding a long sword and facing each other. Chapter 1429. Gui Hen. Nye Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw Gui Hen. He didn't expect Gui Hen to also come to the God territory and appear in the Demon Dragon City. He remembered that Gui Hen and Tiangong had an agreement that he would stay by Tiangong's side until the latter died. Nye Tian guessed that Tiangong must have known that Gui Hen had advanced to the God territory and didn't want to drag the latter any longer, so he sent him to the God territory. Let's go and have a look. Nye Tian's figure moved and he immediately rushed over. Cher and Ed quickly followed behind. 2 figures stood high up in the sky. One of them was Gui Hen, while the other was a young man with delicate features. His eyes were filled with a murderous aura. Sword Mark Realm. Nye Tian's divine sense locked onto Gui Hen, and he immediately noticed that the latter's sword principle had reached the Sword Mark Realm. When Gui Hen was in the Heaven Realm, he was already an ultimate sword profound swordsman and had stayed in this realm for a long time. It wasn't strange for his sword principle to improve after coming to the God territory. Gui Hen's current appearance was the same as when he was in the Heaven Realm. His entire body was hidden in a black robe, so no one could see his face clearly. "Sir, I don't want to be your enemy. Please don't look for trouble," Gui Hen said faintly in the sky. His voice was full of coldness. "If you don't want to be my enemy, then take off your black robe and let me see your face." The young man smiled sinisterly. The murderous intent in his eyes became more obvious. This guy's reason for fighting Gui Hen was strange. He just wanted to see what kind of face was hidden under Gui Hen's black robe. "Sir, I advise you not to do this. It won't do you any good," Gui Hen said again. He obviously didn't want to fight with this person. "Sorry, I'm just a curious person." The young man raised his brows and smiled. "I'll give you 2 choices. One is to take off your black robe, and the other is for me to kill you and take off your black robe. Which one will you choose?" A cold laughter echoed in the sky. It seemed a little crazy and domineering at the same time. It was as if he didn't put Gui Hen in his eyes at all. "The members of the Jian clan are still as overbearing as ever." A familiar voice rang out from the side, filled with faint mockery. Nye Tian's sharp senses captured the voice. Looking towards the source of the voice, he saw a familiar face, the heartbroken young master. "He's here too." Nye Tian frowned. He did not expect to meet the heartbroken breaker here. Of course, he knew that the heartbroken prince was not a member of an Lin. His attire was also very different from the members of an Lin. Nye Tian was very curious about the story between the heartbroken prince and Ren Jinshan. Who is this person? Why is he so domineering? I'm wearing a black robe, so I'm in his way. They are from the Heaven Sword Divine Palace, of course they are domineering. Heaven Sword Divine Palace. Could it be the Heaven Sword Divine Palace, ranked second among the 12 divine palaces? Of course. This person seems to be called Jiandong. He's a genius swordsman of the younger generation in Heaven Sword Divine Palace. He's only over 200 years old, but he's already a Sword Vein Realm swordsman. The crowd looked at the 2 people in the sky and discussed in low voices. Sword Vein swordsman. Nye Tian frowned slightly when he heard the crowd's discussion. He couldn't help but fix his gaze on the swordsman of Heaven Sword Divine Palace, Jiandong. The Heaven Sword Divine Palace was ranked second among the 12 divine palaces. One could imagine how strong it was. This Jiandong was only 200 years old, but he was already a sword-veined swordsman. His talent in swordsmanship was indeed very strong. This guy is a sword-veined swordsman. Ghost Scar is in danger, Nye Tian murmured to himself with a frown. Although Ghost Scar had fused with the Dusk Blade's flame, his swordsmanship strength was a realm lower than Jiandong's. Moreover, he was only an early-stage low god. It was unlikely that he would be a match for Jiandong. Since you insist on fighting, I'll fight with you. Ghost Scar's eyes flickered under the black robe. He spoke in a cold voice as the Ghost Knight Rain appeared in his hand. You think you can fight me? Jiandong sneered as though he had heard a joke. He then shouted coldly, I'll give you 4 words, you overestimate yourself. As his shrill voice faded, Jiandong's eyes darkened. Then, a white cold sword appeared in his hand. It was his sword of spirit, Frost Dust Seal. I'll take your life with this sword, Jiandong said coldly. He pointed with his long sword. Suddenly, a white frost appeared. An overwhelming chill pervaded the air. Frost and snow fell from the sky. At this moment, everyone felt a bone-piercing chill invading their bodies. It made them feel as though they had fallen into an ice cellar. Ghost Scar frowned slightly as he felt the pressing chill rushing toward him. The Ghost Knight Rain pierced forward. A water curtain appeared and instantly condensed into a sword of water ripples, pressing toward Jiandong. Jiandong smiled cold. He didn't care about Ghost Scar's attack at all. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. The moment the water sword collided with the chilly chi, a loud sound was heard, and the huge sword was instantly frozen, turning into a giant ice sword. Hiss! What a terrifying power! When the crowd saw this, they couldn't help but gasp. Their hearts trembled. Although it was only their first confrontation, everyone could see that Jiandong's strength was much stronger than Ghost Scar's. Ghost Scar was also stunned. His eyes couldn't help but tremble violently. Die! Just at this moment, Jiandong let out a low roar, and the huge chill turned into tens of thousands of ice blades. Suddenly, with the momentum of tens of thousands of arrows, they shot towards Ghost Scar. Oh no! Ghost Scar frowned. He knew that something was wrong. A blazing sword of fire gushed out of his body. It turned into a fire shield and wrapped his body. Sword of Fire attribute. When the crowd saw this, they couldn't help but be stunned again. Ghost Scar's sword just now had clearly displayed the Sword of Water attribute. Now, he had used the Sword of Fire attribute. It was really strange. Water and fire were incompatible. Everyone knew this. Why could Ghost Scar have sword essences of both fire and water attributes at the same time? Evening Blade Flame. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He immediately realized that Ghost Scar was using the power of the 6th demonic fire, the Evening Blade Flame. The Evening Blade Flame was the 6th demonic fire. Ghost Scar wouldn't use it unless it was absolutely necessary. Once someone saw through it, he would become the target of public criticism. Who wouldn't want the 6th demonic fire? Demonic fire! Jiandong's eyes trembled slightly. He suddenly reacted. His eyes were filled with joy and great fanaticism. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, countless ice blades bombarded the fire shield formed by the Evening Blade Flame, producing violent muffled sounds. At first, the Evening Blade Flame shield could withstand the attack of the ice blade. However, after a long time, glaring cracks appeared on it. Oh no, the fire shield can't withstand it anymore. Nye Tian screamed in his heart when he sensed that something was wrong. Boom! In the next moment, the Evening Blade Flame shield could no longer withstand the attack of the ice blades and shattered with a loud bang. Then, an endless chill rushed toward Ghost Scar. The black robe around his body was directly torn and shredded. High up in the sky, a face full of desolation appeared in front of everyone's eyes. This face was very terrifying. It was full of holes and thorns and tumors. It made people feel disgusted at first glance. This Nie Tian was suddenly stunned. He had never seen Ghost Scar's true face. He didn't expect the latter's face to be like this. In the next moment, Nie Tian suddenly noticed that Ghost Scar's ears were very sharp and his hair was also golden. Chapter 1430. An elf. Nie Tian's face suddenly changed. He couldn't help but feel a little shocked. He had never expected that Ghost Scar would be an elf. One of the top 5 swordsmanship masters in the Heaven Realm was not a human being. Nie Tian finally understood why Ghost Scar had been hiding under the black robe. It was not only because of his scarred face, but also because of his identity as an elf. In ancient times, elves, dwarves, and other races had been destroyed by other powerful races. Only a few of them had survived, and their status was very low. Now Nie Tian knew that it was the dragon rebel tribe that had destroyed the elves, dwarves, and other races. It was because of the low status of elves and dwarves that Ghost Scar didn't dare to show his true face. As strong as he was, if people knew his real identity, he wouldn't be able to survive in the god realm of the Heaven Realm. This was the iron law of this world. Aliens were not allowed to exist. When Ghost Scar's black robe was torn apart, people saw his ugly face, especially dazzling ears and hair. They were all stunned. The atmosphere suddenly became dead silent. Even the sound of breathing could be heard clearly. Countless eyes stared at Ghost Scar in shock and disdain. Their eyes seemed to be condemning Ghost Scar, saying that he shouldn't exist. His existence was a mistake. Ghost Scar stood in the sky. He suddenly looked up, a complicated light flashing in his eyes. His reaction was very calm, so calm that it was frightening. Ghost Scar glanced at the crowd. Then a chaotic curtain of rain gushed out of his body, wrapping him up and covering his figure and face. Not until then did people realize what was going on, as if they had just woken up from a dream. They immediately screamed, "An elf! This guy is an elf! Elves are originally aliens. How dare he show up in the territory? He's courting death. Such an ugly elf shouldn't exist. Kill him! Kill him!" In the end, the crowd roared like a tsunami. They all wanted to kill Ghost Scar. Nie Tian frowned, his face gloomy. Ghost Scar was his friend. No matter who he was, that wouldn't change. "You've seen my face. Now you can let me go." After a long time, the shouts of the crowd gradually weakened. Ghost Scar opened his mouth faintly. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. "You want to leave just like that?" Jian Dong smiled coldly at this moment, and a cold smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. He said coldly, "Since you're from an inferior race, then I have no reason to let you leave." As his cold voice fell, Jian Dong's silhouette moved. The frost dust seal in his hand pierced out. It was filled with killing intent and chilling intent. A huge icy blade whizzed through the air, pressing down on Ghost Scar. What Jian Dong truly cared about at this moment was the Twilight Blade Heart Flame in Ghost Scar's body. If he could obtain the Twilight Blade Heart Flame, his sword Dao realm and strength might increase once again. In his view, the Twilight Blade Heart Flame on Ghost Scar, this kind of person, was simply a reckless waste of God's gift. Boom! In an instant, the void shook violently. The world was filled with a bone-chilling coldness. It was extremely terrifying. Jian Dong was indeed worthy of being a cultivator of the sword range. The strength of his sword patterns was extremely frightening. With just a wave of his hand, he could freeze the world. What a frightening sword! When the crowd saw this frightening sword, their eyes couldn't help but tremble as they exclaimed. However, Ghost Scar didn't seem to notice at all. He just walked calmly without any intention of resisting. He knew that once his identity was exposed, he would no longer have a chance to leave this place. Even if Jian Dong didn't kill him, there would still be people in the crowd below who would. "Be careful!" At this moment, Nie Tian roared in a low voice. Then, he stomped his feet and the wings on his back shook violently. His silhouette turned into a black flame of nothingness and soared into the sky. Strange way of heaven and earth, kill. Nie Tian's silhouette was extremely fast. In an instant, he arrived. Then, he struck with his long sword. The strange way of heaven and earth used the strange way of heaven and earth. Two giant snakes burning with terrible black flames rolled out and bombarded the ice blade. Rumble! There was a loud noise in the air. The ice blade was forcefully blocked, and the two giant snakes of black flames were immediately frozen and shattered. Nie Tian's silhouette was slightly sluggish. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Jian Dong's strength was that of a late-stage low god. His godhead wasn't as strong as Nie Tian's devil yuan, but his sword art realm was a whole realm higher than Nie Tian's. Jian Dong's face darkened when he saw that his sword was blocked. When he saw that Nie Tian's face was so young, his face became even more gloomy. The fact that such a young swordsman had actually managed to block his sword made Jian Dong feel humiliated. Nie Tian. Ghost Scar suddenly turned around. When he saw the familiar figure behind him, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. Long time no see, Ghost Scar. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I really didn't expect to meet you here. This is great. Nie Tian laughed loudly. He didn't put Jian Dong in his eyes at all. This made the latter even angrier. Brat, who are you? Jian Dong roared in anger. His eyes were surging with killing intent. The crowd's gazes also focused on Nie Tian at this moment. Their eyes were filled with astonishment and shock. They were all wondering if Nie Tian had gone mad. Saving an elf at this time was no different from publicly declaring that he was going against everyone below. However, Nie Tian didn't care about this at all. He turned around to look at Jian Dong and said indifferently, Who I am, what does it have to do with you? You. Jian Dong was choked by Nie Tian's words. He suddenly felt a lump of stuffiness in his chest. He couldn't swallow it nor spit it out. His face was as ugly as it could be. It's him. At this time, the heartbroken young master also recognized Nie Tian. He couldn't help but frown. He thought to himself, this brat actually made a move at this time. Isn't he afraid of becoming a public target? Brat, since you want to save someone, then you can die with him. Jian Dong's eyebrows furrowed. Immediately afterwards, killing intent blossomed in his eyes as he cast frost dust freeze. The boundless coldness turned into endless frost, and countless sharp ice blades appeared, blotting out the sky as they bore down on Nie Tian. This time, Jian Dong was really angry. Of course, he could see that Nie Tian was already a sword-marked swordsman. Moreover, he was only in his 20s. This made Jian Dong even more unwilling to let Nie Tian live. To him, Nie Tian was a potential opponent. It was best to kill him directly. You want to kill me just like that? Nie Tianling laughed. The wings on his back moved, and a majestic power of stars surged out of his body. It quickly condensed into a shield of stars. At the same time, the black flames of nothingness were released even more violently. His whole body was like a huge black flame sword, rushing straight at Jian Dong. What is he doing? The crowd couldn't help but tremble when they saw this scene. Their eyes instantly became dull. Facing Jian Dong's attack, Nie Tian didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced. Was he courting death? Smart. At this time, the corner of the heartbroken young master's mouth curled up slightly. He murmured, the Jian family's brat used such a large-scale attack because he was worried that his opponent would escape. Unfortunately, this silver-haired brat called Nie Tian did the opposite. He directly rushed towards the ice blades, catching the Jian family's brat off guard. The heartbroken young master's eyes shone, and the corner of his mouth suddenly curled up. Chapter 1431. Boom! In the void, Nie Tian's sword intent and the black flames of nothingness fused perfectly. His body turned into a giant flaming sword that blasted straight at Jian Dong. Jian Dong's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this, and his face revealed a look of horror. He originally thought that Nie Tian would definitely not dare to fight him head-on, so he used such a large-scale sword move to disperse the power of the sword pattern. He was afraid that Nie Tian would escape. However, he never expected that Nie Tian had no intention of escaping at all. Instead, he directly rushed over. Chi chi chi. There was an ear-piercing sound in the air. The giant black flame sword broke through the endless ice blades like a hot knife through butter and instantly arrived in front of Jian Dong. Oh no! Jian Dong exclaimed in his heart. He wanted to attack again, but it was already too late. You overestimate yourself. Nie Tian's mouth turned cold, and his deep voice sounded like a death knell in the air. Bang! In the next moment there was a muffled sound, and Jian Dong's figure flew out, dripping with blood in the air. Nie Tian did not hold back in this sword move. He wanted to kill Jian Dong on the spot. Although he knew that Jian Dong was from Sky Sword Divine Palace, and he also knew that Sky Sword Divine Palace was ranked second among the 12 Divine Palaces, Jian Dong was too hateful. Not only did he uncover Ghost Scar's black robe, but he also wanted to kill. How could Nie Tian not see that Jian Dong had designs on the Twilight Blade Flame? If he did not kill such a violent and unreasonable person, it would be difficult to dispel the hatred in Nie Tian's heart. Jian Dong's figure flew back hundreds of meters. Sword intent surged all over his body, and he forcibly stabilized his body. After taking a direct hit from Nie Tian, Jian Dong was in a very sorry state. His whole body was dripping with blood, and his face was as pale as paper. However, in order not to embarrass himself too much, he still held back his anger and stood in the air, facing Nie Tian. You had the chance to escape, but you didn't. Don't blame me then. When Nie Tian saw Jian Dong glaring at him furiously, the corners of his lips curled up. He took a step forward and unleashed a berserk sword intent that pressed down on Jian Dong. What are you trying to do? Jian Dong was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. He couldn't help but cry out in alarm, and his face was filled with extreme shock. He had never imagined that Nie Tian actually wanted to kill him. Because he was a member of the Heaven Sword Divine Palace, he was certain that Nie Tian would not dare to kill him, so he did not flee. However, Nie Tian was like a madman. He didn't give him any chance at all and directly charged over. Such a violent killing intent was definitely not a bluff. Is this guy crazy? How dare you kill someone from the Heaven Sword God Palace? Jian Dong is a genius of Heaven Sword Divine Palace. If the silver-haired brat kills him, how can Heaven Sword Divine Palace spare him? When the crowd saw the scene in the sky, they cried out in shock, their faces filled with disbelief. Nie Tian was too savage. He actually dared to kill Jian Dong. The heartbroken young master also frowned when he saw this. His expression could not help but change slightly, and he actually became somewhat nervous. Nie Tian was too reckless. How could someone like Jian Dong be killed so casually? Kill you. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's icy voice already sounded. He said loudly, "You think that because you are a member of the Heaven Sword Divine Palace, I don't dare to kill you? What a joke." Jian Dong dared to kill Ghost Scar and also dared to kill Nie Tian. How could Nie Tian not dare to kill him? No. At this moment, Jian Dong finally felt fear. He howled miserably, and his eyes became dull. There seemed to be a terrifying power hidden in Nie Tian's sword intent. It could devour a person's soul and divine sense, making people involuntarily feel fear. Jian Dong's feeling was right. Nie Tian's sword intent contained the soul-devouring sword intent, which had the power to devour a martial artist's divine sense. At the moment of death, Jian Dong's eyes trembled violently, and he was even about to cry. However, at this moment a strange change suddenly occurred. "Stop!" In the void, a deep and vigorous voice suddenly sounded. Immediately, an enormous sword shadow broke through the air without warning, like a dragon breaking out of the abyss. Its powerful momentum engulfed the heavens and the earth. Nie Tian slightly creased his brows. He suddenly felt an irresistible pressure coming at him. His sword shadow actually collapsed in an instant. However, the enormous sword pressure did not stop. Instead, it pressed down even more violently. Nie Tian let out a muffled groan. He felt as if he was carrying a huge mountain on his back. He was suddenly unable to breathe. His face was flushed red, and his body was about to explode under this terrifying sword pressure. The newcomer was too terrifying. His strength was at least that of a high god. His realm of swordsmanship was even more unfathomable. At the same time that person appeared, the crowd below felt a boundless pressure descend upon them, making it hard for them to breathe. Everyone was certain that with the appearance of such a powerful figure, Nie Tian would undoubtedly die. The black-clothed figure appeared and looked cold at Nie Tian. He growled in a deep voice, his killing intent surging, "Brat, die!" Nie Tian immediately felt the pressure around him skyrocket. His entire body was deformed by the pressure. His face also became hideous and distorted, as if his body would collapse at any time. This person's strength was too terrifying. It was not something that Nie Tian could contend with at all. If it weren't for his martial body being far superior to ordinary warriors, he would have long been covered in blood. Nie Tian. Upon seeing this, Cher let out a tender roar. Her little face was filled with astonishment and panic. The black-clothed person was too strong. Even she could not contend against him. Big brother Nie Tian. Ed also cried out in alarm. His face was filled with horror. At this moment, how he wished that Ming Hui was present. A member of the Jian family bullying a junior in front of so many people. Don't you feel ashamed? Just as Nie Tian was about to collapse, a calm voice sounded. Then, a black-clothed figure soared into the sky. His body released a halo of light that enveloped Nie Tian. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a soft force attack him. Suddenly, the pressure around him weakened a lot. In the blink of an eye, it completely disappeared. When the black-clothed person from the Jian family saw that someone had appeared to save Nie Tian, he could not help but frown. He looked at the newcomer and said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Do you have the right to interfere in the affairs of Heaven's Sword Divine Palace?" The black-clothed person's eyes were as gloomy as water. His face trembled slightly. He was obviously very angry. Nie Tian recovered a little at this moment. He looked at the black-clothed person and immediately understood that this person was following behind Jian Dong to secretly protect him. Jian Dong was a genius of the way of the Sword of Heaven's Sword Divine Palace. It was not strange for him to have secret guards protecting him. The black-clothed person's aura was very strong, slightly weaker than Qi Yefeng and the others. He should be around the peak of superior god level. However, his way of the sword was very terrifying. He seemed to be even stronger than Cher. He should be at the essence of sword level. With the strength of a peak superior god and the essence of sword level, such a person was naturally not someone that Nie Tian could contend with. Fortunately, he made a move. Nie Tian looked at the other person and let out a long sigh of relief. The person who had saved him at the critical moment was none other than the heartbroken prince. Actually, before Nie Tian killed Jian Dong, he had made a bet. He bet that Jian Dong had no one to protect him. Unfortunately, he had lost the bet. However, he had his own way out, and that was the heartbroken prince. Before the heartbroken prince left, he had said that he owed him a favor. Now was the time to return the favor. It was precisely because he knew that the heartbroken prince would make a move that Nie Tian dared to kill Jian Dong. He knew that the heartbroken prince's strength was at the level of a lord. However, even now, Nie Tian did not know what kind of person the heartbroken prince was. Chapter 1432. In the sky, Nie Tian looked at the heartbroken prince. His eyes flickered involuntarily. He was curious about who this person was. An overgod should not be a nameless figure in the god-shaking territory. The heartbroken prince's appearance caused a discussion among the people below. Who is this person? He dares to attack the people of the Sky Sword Divine Palace. Is he tired of living? Yeah. The Sky Sword Divine Palace is the second strongest among the 12 palaces. Does this person not want to stay in the God-shaking territory after offending them? This guy is very strong. He's probably someone important. Let's see what the people of the Sky Sword Divine Palace will do. The crowd whispered. Their eyes shone as they prepared to watch a good show. In the sky, the heartbroken prince looked at the secret guard of the Jian family and said indifferently, "You want to use the Sky Sword Divine Palace to pressure me? I don't care." The indifferent "I don't care" seemed cold and overbearing. It was as if the heartbroken prince did not take the Sky Sword Divine Palace seriously at all. The secret guard's eyes darkened slightly. He said coldly, "How dare you? Do you know that the Sky Sword Divine Palace can kill you just because of that? You want to kill me just because of that?" The heartbroken prince smiled cold and said, "Go back and ask Jian Wuya if he dares to say that." Jian Wuya. Hearing the heartbroken prince say that name, the secret guard of the Jian family and Jian Dong's faces changed at the same time. The crowd below was stunned when they heard the heartbroken prince's words. They were so shocked that they could not speak. Jian Wuya was the name of the palace master of the Sky Sword Divine Palace. The heartbroken prince had directly said that name. This was enough to prove that his status was no lower than Jian Wuya's. "Who are you?" The secret guard of the Jian family was relatively calm. He asked with a deep voice, but his eyes could not help but tremble. There was unconcealable fear in his eyes. "You can leave. Today's matter ends here." The heartbroken prince did not answer the secret guard. Instead, his eyes darkened and he said cold. The secret guard of the Jian family was stunned. Then, his face darkened even more. He estimated that he was indeed not the heartbroken prince's opponent. His eyes flickered and he said with a deep voice, "Can you tell me your name?" "Leave." The heartbroken prince's eyes darkened. He let out a low roar, and a tyrannical chi wave spread out. A momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas suddenly burst forth. The Jian family's secret guard felt a powerful force coming at him. He couldn't even stand straight and could only retreat. "No matter who you are, the Heaven Sword God Palace will accompany you to the end." The Jian family's secret guard retreated 1,000 meters away. His face was as gloomy as water as he shouted. With that, he did not stay any longer and left with Jian Dong. "Really?" The heartbroken prince looked in the direction of the Jian family's secret guard. The corners of his mouth curled up in a disdainful manner. The crowd was also stunned at this moment, their faces filled with shock. Who would have thought that the heartbroken prince would chase away the Jian family? In the God-shocking domain, it was rare for someone from the Heaven Sword Divine Palace to admit defeat in public. After a long time, the crowd gradually calmed down and left. Before they left, they did not forget to glance at the heartbroken young master. Their eyes were filled with fear. "Sir, thank you for lending a hand." Nye Tian took a step forward. His gaze was indifferent as he looked at the heartbroken young master. "You are Nye Tian, right?" The heartbroken young master turned around slowly and glanced at Nye Tian with a strange gaze. He suddenly said, "Are you from the Nye family? Do I look like one?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. Then, he laughed. The heartbroken young master smiled but did not deny it. "You don't even care about the Heaven Sword Divine Palace. I am curious. Who are you?" Nye Tian also smiled and asked. "I am myself. It's that simple." The heartbroken young master suddenly became cold and said, "You have used up the favor you owe me. Don't force me to help you next time, because I won't save you again." With that, the heartbroken young master's figure moved and he left. Nye Tian was slightly stunned. Looking at the heartbroken young master's back, he became even more curious. "Nye Tian, are you okay?" At that moment, Cher appeared. She looked nervous, afraid that Nye Tian would be in trouble. I'm fine. Nye Tian smiled faintly and his expression returned to normal. Although he had been pressured by the Jian family secret guard, his recovery ability was very strong. As long as it was not a fatal injury, he could recover instantly. Nye Tian, thank you. At that moment, Ghost Scar's voice was heard. Although it was cold, it was sincere. We are friends. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He still remembered that when he fused with the heart of nothingness and fainted, Emperor Serene and the others wanted to kill him. It was all thanks to the protection of Ghost Scar and the others. This was something he would never forget. Now that Ghost Scar was in danger, he could not just stand by and watch. Ghost Scar, what happened to your face? Nye Tian could not help but ask as he recalled the face he had seen. Ghost Scar was already a God Realm warrior. His martial body's recovery ability was very strong. Even if his limbs were broken, he could regrow them. However, his face was full of holes. It was very scary, as if it was a wound that could not be healed. It's a kind of curse. Ghost Scar nodded. He obviously did not want to say anything more and said, "Thank you very much. We will leave now." Nye Tian was a little surprised. He did not expect Ghost Scar to leave just like that, which caught him off guard. However, he had no reason to let Ghost Scar stay, so he nodded and said, "We will meet again." Ghost Scar nodded and his body moved, leaving directly. Looking at the direction in which Ghost Scar left, Nye Tian helplessly smiled and thought to himself, "Everyone has their own path to walk. It's just that this path is not easy. Only the person knows how difficult it is." Ghost Scar was an elf. It was not easy for him to reach this step. How could an outsider understand what he had endured? "Brother Nye Tian, is this elf your friend?" Ed frowned and asked curiously. "Yes." Nye Tian nodded and looked at the Heaven Net platform in the center of the square. He smiled and said, "It's time to get the divine spark." Of course, he did not forget that he came here to get the divine spark of a superior god with the ice attribute. "The inescapable net is ready," Nye Tian murmured to himself. His body moved and he directly landed on the Heaven Net platform. Not long after, an old man in black appeared. He did not say anything and directly handed a storage bag to Nye Tian. Nye Tian checked it and confirmed that it was what he wanted. He thanked the old man and did not stay any longer. Not long after, Nye Tian and the others returned to the world created by the boundary of the universe. Ming Hui was waiting for them in a valley outside the thatched hut. Nye Tian and the others went to the valley and saw the scene above their heads. They were immediately stunned. In the sky above the valley, a large spiritual formation stood majestically and slowly operated. The powerful formation power filled the space of tens of thousands of meters. There were colorful runes moving in the void, which were very dazzling. Chapter 1433. Ingrui had previously said that in order to help Nye Tian merge with the cosmos boundary, he had to refine the heaven and earth great array. Looking at the grand array in front of him, Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly. He didn't expect the heaven and earth great array to be so huge. Nye Tian could feel the majestic energy contained within the grand array. Among all the spiritual arrays he had seen, only those ancient grand arrays could compare to it. He didn't expect Ingrui to be an array grandmaster. He had thought that the so-called heaven and earth great array was just a small array, but it seemed like he had guessed wrong. "Nye Tian, give me the godhead." Ingrui couldn't help but smile when he saw Nye Tian's shocked expression. Nye Tian nodded and passed the godhead to Ingrui. He was very curious about what Ingrui would do next, and what kind of changes would occur to the heaven and earth great array. Ingrui held the ice element godhead in his palm and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His body released a mysterious force that flowed into the godhead. In the next moment, a strange scene unfolded. Stimulated by the mysterious force, the godhead began to release violent ice element energy. Strands of ice element energy flowed endlessly into the heaven and earth great array. What a miraculous technique! Nye Tian was amazed watching this scene. Inguri was actually able to directly stimulate the energy contained within the godhead. It was truly terrifying. A godhead was the condensation of a cultivator's essence, equivalent to a spiritual beast's spiritual core. It contained a terrifying amount of energy. Inside the heaven and earth great array, as the ice element energy continued to flow into it, a layer of ice crystals formed around it. Under the illumination of the ice crystals, the array's power became even more dazzling. Nye Tian's eyes shone brightly as he stared at the scene in front of him. He didn't even blink, afraid that he would miss out on any exciting moment. A short while later, the ice element godhead gradually weakened and disappeared completely. In such a short time, Inguri had actually stimulated the entire godhead's energy. This kind of method was truly terrifying. At that moment, the entire heaven and earth fusion array became even more dazzling. Under the illumination of the ice crystals, the entire sky was lit up. Heaven and earth blending array rise. Ming Hui let out a long breath and roared. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire formation underwent an even more terrifying change. Boom! Boom! The power within the formation suddenly became berserk. The endless power of the formation gathered together and quickly formed two huge vortexes, one above and one below, echoing each other from afar. The whirlpool in midair continuously absorbed the spirit intent power in the air, and the power within the whirlpool became more and more violent. The vortex close to the ground was actually absorbing energy from the ground and was also surging crazily. Nye Tian was shocked as he sensed the power within the two vortexes. That kind of power was extremely terrifying, as if it could engulf everything. Nye Tian, the heaven and earth fusion formation has been set up. We can enter the array now. Ming Hui gently spat out a mouthful of impure air, and his slightly pale complexion improved a lot. Enter the array? Nye Tian was stunned. He stared at the two vortexes in shock. Ming Hui's meaning was obviously for him to enter the vortex. Don't worry. Although the power of the heaven and earth vortexes is strong, they won't harm anyone. They just stimulate the power within their body and release it. Ming Hui smiled faintly and said, but I don't know how strong the universe boundary is right now. So, I can't be sure how long this fusion process will take. Nye Tian was stunned and said, it won't take a long time, right? The grand competition of the 12 Shrine was in 2 months. He couldn't miss it no matter what. Maybe a few days, maybe more than 10 days, maybe even a few months. I can't be sure. Ming Hui frowned and said in a deep voice. Nye Tian's face darkened. The heaven and earth fusion formation had been activated. Ming Hui probably spent hundreds of years preparing this formation. At this moment, no matter what, he couldn't back out. He could only bite the bullet and go in. Nye Tian could only pray in his heart that the fusion of the universe boundary would end soon. Thinking of this, Nye Tian didn't hesitate anymore. He looked back at Cher and took a step forward. He leaped into the air and entered the heaven and earth fusion formation. Nye Tian's figure moved agilely. Without hesitation, he stepped into the heaven and earth vortex in the air. The moment he entered the vortex, Nye Tian felt a huge force pressing down on him from all directions. It almost tore his body apart. He endured the pain in his body and didn't make a sound. You have strong willpower. Ming Hui looked at Nye Tian. He obviously knew how terrifying the power of the heaven and earth vortex was. Nye Tian was able to resist this kind of pain. It was evident that his mind was strong. Miss Cher, you two stand guard at the side. Don't let anything get close to the formation. Ming Hui turned around and said to and Cher. Although there was no one else here other than them, he still needed to give them the necessary instructions. Okay. Cher and nodded heavily. Ming Hui didn't hesitate anymore. He leaped into the heaven and earth vortex close to the ground. The moment he entered the heaven and earth vortex, the ground suddenly shook. Endless power surged out from the ground and rushed into the vortex. Ming Hui felt the impact of the powerful power. Even though his martial body was strong, he couldn't help but frown. In the next moment, Ingri looked up at Nie Tian and asked in a deep voice, "Nie Tian, are you ready?" "Yes." Nie Tian nodded heavily. He had gradually adapted to the violent power in the heaven and earth vortex. He could faintly feel that this power not only didn't harm his martial body, but it also strengthened it to a certain extent. "Okay." Ming Hui let out a low roar. With a thought, endless dazzling white light surged out of his body. Like a stormy sea, it surged out and instantly filled the entire heaven and earth vortex. Boom! Boom! The next moment, the two heaven and earth vortexes seemed to sense something. They shook at the same time and randomly shot out a wave of power. They actually clashed. Boom! The two surging powers collided and actually formed a connecting passage between the two vortexes. In an instant, the power in the two vortexes was connected. The entire heaven and earth fusion array immediately began to operate crazily. The heaven and earth vortexes began to absorb power from the sky and the earth even more frantically. At this moment, Nie Tian felt an even more terrifying power impact. It was as if there were countless wild beasts galloping and roaring in his body. The sudden pain made him unable to bear it anymore and he roared angrily. Ming Hui glanced at Nie Tian but didn't stop. Instead, he released the boundary power of the universe in his body even more violently. Endless white light shone and surged in the heaven and earth vortexes. This was the power of the boundary of the universe. It overflowed from Ming Hui's body and slowly became gentle after being weakened by the heaven and earth vortexes. After a while, the two heaven and earth vortexes gradually calmed down. Ming Hui and Nie Tian fell unconscious at the same time. The white light in the former's body passed through the passage between the two vortexes and slowly flowed into the latter's body. Ming Hui began to release the boundary of the universe while Nie Tian began to integrate the boundary of the universe. Chapter 1434. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed in the small world created by the cosmos boundary. The heaven-earth blend formation was still in operation and the vortex of heaven and earth was still surging. The two people in the vortex were still unconscious. "Sister Cher, it's already been a month. Why haven't teacher and brother Nie Tian woken up yet?" Ed frowned worriedly. "I don't know either." Cher frowned slightly. She was also puzzled. A few days ago, the white light on Ming Hui's body had become much weaker. However, it was still there and continued to be absorbed by Nie Tian. The entire process had slowed down considerably, but there was no sign of it stopping. Cher and Ed did not know much about the heaven-earth blend formation. Hence, they could only watch from the side, not daring to do anything. At this moment, even though Nie Tian was unconscious, heaven-shaking, earth-shattering changes were taking place inside of him. As the cosmos boundary was absorbed by his body, the white light of the universe and the black flames of nothingness began to fuse. The cosmos boundary and the heart of nothingness were known as the twin supreme flames. The former contained the power of creation, while the latter contained the power of destruction. It was easy to imagine how intense the process would be when two types of flames collided with each other. The meridians, bones and blood in Nie Tian's body were constantly being battered by the twin flames. The pain was not something an ordinary person could endure. However, as the twin flames fused, the galaxy boundary in Nie Tian's 10th Yuan meridian gradually returned to normal. The twin flames also reached a wonderful balance as they continued to batter against each other. The two powers, which had been mutually reinforcing and restraining each other, gradually found a balance in the world of the raw star stone. As the twin flames fused, Nie Tian's martial body also underwent an astonishing change. The meridians and bones in his body were filled with the power of the twin flames. If he were to look inside himself, he would discover that his body was actually surging with a very strange chaotic flame. This was the result of the twin flames fusing. Then, in the blink of an eye, another month passed. Everything in the heaven-earth blend formation continued. Teacher's body clearly no longer has the white light. Why haven't they woken up? Ed frowned in confusion. It had been 2 months since Nie Tian and Ming Hui had entered the heaven-earth blend formation, but the two were still unconscious. The universe boundary in Ming Hui's body had been completely extracted and absorbed by Nie Tian. But strangely, the two still did not wake up. Shui Er's beautiful brows were tightly knitted together. Her beautiful eyes flickered, but she did not answer Edie's question. Instead, she stared blankly at the formation. She was very perceptive, almost as strong as Nie Tian of origin. She had already discovered that Nie Tian and Ming Hui were absorbing power through the vortex of heaven and earth. Of Ming Hui, in especially, and was absorbing the mother energy from the earth. That was the purest life force, containing a powerful life aura. Shui Er reckoned that when the boundary of the universe in Ming Hui's body was pulled out, his body would definitely become extremely weak. Absorbing the Mother Earth vital energy would allow him to recover his martial body. Nie Tian, on the other hand, was slowly merging the flame power, and it seemed that he would be done soon. Cher was very worried. If Nie Tian did not wake up, he would miss the grand competition of the 12 Shrine. The grand competition of the 12 divine palaces was very important to him, and he couldn't afford to miss it. Cher and brother Nie Tian waited for a few more days. Why haven't teacher and brother Nie Tian woken up yet? Ed was a little annoyed and frowned. Cher was also annoyed, but she could still maintain her composure. Boom! At this moment, the heaven-earth blend formation suddenly shook, and a terrifying scene happened. Crack, crack, crack. Countless cracking sounds could be heard. Countless cracks appeared on the entire formation, and it seemed like it was about to collapse. Not good. The heaven-earth blend formation can't hold on any longer. Cher's eyes flickered, and she couldn't help but cry out. Boom! The next moment, there was a violent rumble in midair. After a loud bang, the heaven-earth blend formation collapsed, and the 2 whirlpools also collapsed, turning into endless power that dissipated in the air. Nie Tian and Ming Hui's bodies fell from the sky, and Cher and Ed caught them. Nie Tian. Cher laid Nie Tian flat on the ground and cried out. She used her consciousness to check, and after confirming that Nie Tian's breathing was very stable, her complexion improved a little. Teacher, you're awake. At this moment, Ed cried out in joy. Ming Hui had woken up. Ming Hui sat up abruptly, and his turbid eyes gradually became clear. He calmed down instantly and then looked at Nie Tian. Is Nie Tian all right? As he spoke, Ming Hui stood up and came to Nie Tian's side. He carefully sensed his body and then let out a long breath of turbid air. He said, "The dual flames are fusing very well in his body. Take him to the room first, and he should wake up soon." Okay. Cher nodded heavily, lifted Nie Tian up, and walked into the hut. After half a day, Nie Tian finally woke up. The moment he opened his eyes, the first thing that appeared in front of him was a devastatingly beautiful little face. Nie Tian, you're finally awake. Seeing that Nie Tian had woken up, Cher smiled sweetly, and it was very charming. Cher, I made you worry. Nie Tian sat up and directly got off the bed. Suddenly, he thought of something and exclaimed, "How long was I out for?" "Don't worry. The grand competition of the 12 shrines hasn't started yet. We still have time." Cher, of course, knew what Nie Tian was worried about and said with a smile, "That's good." Nie Tian let out a long breath of turbid air. Only now did he realize that he had successfully fused with the boundary of the universe. He couldn't help but smile. He immediately sensed his body, and found that the heart of nothingness was under his control. The heart of nothingness had always been a sword hanging over his head, and he was worried that it would fall at any time. Now that the sword had disappeared, of course, he was happy. Next, Nye Tian carefully sensed his body. His strength hadn't improved, and his sword principal realm was still the same, but his martial body was much stronger than before. Moreover, Nye Tian could faintly feel that there was a strange flame surging within his body at all times, continuously tempering his martial body and making it even more terrifying. This flame should be the chaotic flame formed after the boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness fused. Nye Tian murmured in his heart. He didn't know why the name chaotic flame suddenly appeared in his mind. The chaotic flame was a fusion of the power of creation from the boundary of the universe and the power of destruction from the heart of nothingness. It was definitely an even more terrifying demonic flame. Right now, the chaotic flame seemed to be just a small flame, but if one used their divine sense to sense it, they would feel that it contained an extremely terrifying power, like a vast ocean, vast and endless. I wonder how Elder Ming is doing. I'll go see him first. Nye Tian smiled faintly, and prepared to go see Ming Hui first. The grand competition of the 12 shrines was not far away. Nye Tian prepared to say goodbye to Ming Hui, go to Nine Heavens City, and then immediately return to the Red Moon Divine Palace. After a while, Nye Tian and Cher came to the hall of the Straw Hut. Seeing Ming Hui and Ed in the hall, they directly walked in. Chapter 1435. In the main hall of the grass hut, Nye Tian suddenly felt that Ming Hui's aura had weakened. It was not weak, but truly weak. He could not help but change his expression. He immediately realized that Ming Hui's strength had regressed. It's nothing. It's just a normal reaction after the boundary of the universe leaves the body. Ming Hui smiled indifferently and said, I gave up the demon dragon's body and imprisoned the demon dragon's soul in a human's body, but I can still have a lifespan that exceeds ordinary people. It's all because of the boundary of the universe. Now that the boundary of the universe has left my body, it's not strange that my strength is somewhat weakened. Elder Ming, the weakening of your strength won't endanger your life, right? Nye Tian nodded slightly and asked in a deep voice. If Ming Hui was in danger of losing his life because of losing the boundary of the universe, Nye Tian would feel uneasy. I won't. Ming Hui laughed heartily and said, after losing the boundary of the universe, my martial body no longer needs to withstand that kind of huge power. Even though my lifespan now far exceeds that of ordinary people, I can still continue to live for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. The boundary of the universe left his body. Although Ming Hui's aura was weak, his martial body recovered and became stronger. The boundary of the universe had put too much pressure on him. Now that he had left his body, his strength had been reduced, but it gave him the hope of reaching the peak of the God realm. Overall, it was a good thing for Inscription that the boundaries of the universe no longer existed. That's good. Nye Tian smiled faintly and breathed a sigh of relief. Next, Immemorial examined Nye Tian's body. A faint smile appeared on his face as he said, the two great demonic fires have fused very well in your body. It seems to have formed a new fire. At the same time, it contains the power of creation from the boundary of the universe and the power of destruction from the heart of nothingness. Right now, this new demonic fire is still very weak, but it has already caused a qualitative change to your martial body. In the future, as your strength increases, the power of this demonic fire will become more and more powerful. I'm afraid it won't be much weaker than the legendary fire source. After Ming Hui finished speaking, he nodded slightly. He did not expect the boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness to fuse so perfectly. It was as if these two demonic flames were born for Nye Tian. Origin of fire? Nye Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard these words and asked, what is that? It's a kind of world origin energy. It's useless for you to know about it now. It's better not to say it. Ming Hui laughed, but did not explain too much. Nye Tian had a helpless expression on his face. His current strength was indeed too weak. It would have been fine if he had met an ordinary young martial artist. However, against experts like the heartbroken young master and the Jian family's secret guard, he would not be able to withstand a single blow. Power, everything was power. He had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Elder Ming, the grand competition of the 12 Divine Palaces is about to begin. I am now a member of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, so I must participate in the grand competition of the 12 Divine Palaces. I cannot stay here any longer. I must leave, Nie Tian said solemnly as he bid farewell to Ming Hui. You're from the Red Moon Divine Palace? Ming Hui was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect Nie Tian to have such an identity. He knew that Nie Tian was a member of the Feng Yunye clan, but he didn't expect the latter to have joined the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Yes. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Seeing that Ming Hui seemed to have something to say, he couldn't help but ask, Elder Ming, do you know anything about Qi Yefeng? On the surface, Qi Yefeng looked like a very kind person with the demeanor of an elder. However, before Nie Tian left the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, he saw how Qi Yefeng killed Long Wei and Wei Jinren. He was deeply shocked. He could feel that Qi Yefeng was definitely not as simple as he appeared on the surface. Qi Yefeng. Elder Ming let out a long sigh and said, this person looks kind on the surface, but in reality, he is a hypocritical and cunning person. I have interacted with this person before. At that time, he had just left the Dark Sea Black prison. His strength was not strong, and he had not established the Crimson Moon Divine Palace yet. At that time, I saw with my own eyes that this person killed dozens of his companions with his own hands in order to survive. If it wasn't for the fact that my strength far surpassed his, I'm afraid I would have been killed by him. It may not be a wise choice for you to join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. There's actually such a thing. Nie Tian frowned and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. Qi Yefeng was indeed a sanctimonious scum. On the surface, he was one person, but behind the scenes, he was another. Thank you for the reminder, Elder Ming. I will be careful. Nie Tian nodded. He was currently residing in the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, so it was really not good for him to fall out with Qi Yefeng. He believed that with Yi Qinghai as his trump card, Qi Yefeng wouldn't dare to do anything to him. No matter what, I must participate in the grand competition of the 12 shrines. Nie Tian frowned and murmured in his heart. At that moment, Nie Tian and Cher didn't stay any longer and prepared to leave immediately. Big brother Nie Tian, At that moment, Ed suddenly shouted and looked at Ming Hui with a face full of expectation. Brat, you think your master is old and has grown up? You don't want to stay here anymore, do you? Ming Hui, of course, understood Ed's meaning and said snappily. Although he was blaming Ed, his tone was full of love. Teacher, it's not like that. I just want to. Ed thought that Ming Hui was angry and quickly explained. Brat, don't say any more. Ming Hui laughed heartily and said, your strength is already strong enough to protect yourself. Since you want to go out, how can your master stop you? Ming Hui said, and his eyes couldn't help but flicker. Of course, he understood that Ed had to walk his own path. He couldn't stay by Ed's side forever. When a child grows up, he has to go out and try his luck. Go. Ming Hui smiled faintly, but there was a touch of tears in his eyes. Teacher. Ed's heart ached. He turned around and knelt in front of Ming Hui and said, Teacher has given Ed a new life. In the future, no matter where Ed goes, I will be Teacher's disciple. Ed will definitely come back to visit Teacher often. Brat, it's enough that you have the heart. My old bones are very tough. There's no need for you to worry about me. Ming Hui smiled faintly and helped Ed up. Nie Tian gave the teacher and disciple some time, then said, Elder Ming, don't worry. I will definitely ensure Ed's safety. Ming Hui nodded slightly and said, Nie Tian, Ed is too young. He doesn't understand the outside world. In the following period of time, please take care of him. Definitely. Nye Tian smiled faintly, but his eyes were extremely firm. Edi's current identity wasn't simple. He was the new Demon Dragon King, although he didn't know about this. Nye Tian even suspected that when Ed grew up in the future, he wouldn't be weaker than an Ai Jianming. After all, Elder Ming said that the demon dragon's heart created the ultimate demon dragon body. It was an existence that wasn't more terrifying than the golden giant dragon. Nye Tian and the other two didn't waste any more time. They immediately said goodbye and left. Not long after, the three directly left the demon dragon city. There were still more than 10 days left before the grand competition of the 12 Shrine. Nye Tian calculated the time and decided to go to Nine Heaven City first. Chapter 1436. After Nye Tian's group left Demon Dragon City, they immediately set off for Nine Heaven City. The journey was peaceful and there was no trouble. On his way, Nye Tian discovered that many people were heading towards the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. After asking around, he learned that the grand competition of the 12 Divine Palaces would be held in the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Nye Tian was puzzled. Why would such an important grand competition of the 12 shrines be held in the weakest Red Moon Divine Palace? It was puzzling. However, after listening to the discussions of the people around him, he instantly understood. In this year's grand competition of the 12 Shrine Palaces, all the palace masters of the 12 Shrine Palaces will appear. It's not bad for the tiny Crimson Moon Divine Palace to be able to shine once before it's time to perish. Glorious my ass! The reason why the grand competition of the 12 shrines is arranged in Red Moon Divine Palace is so that the other forces can directly divide Red Moon Land after the competition. Red Moon Divine Palace hasn't produced a heaven-defying character for hundreds of years. This time, they will definitely be at the bottom and are destined to be removed from the 12 shrines. After the competition, the other shrines will directly divide Red Moon Land and save a lot of trouble. Listening to the discussions of the crowd, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown. It turned out that the other shrines had determined that Red Moon Divine Palace couldn't make a comeback, so they wanted to directly divide Red Moon Land after the competition. Arranging the grand competition of the 12 shrines in Red Moon Divine Palace undoubtedly saved a lot of trouble. It seems that the other divine palaces can't wait to divide up Red Moon. Nye Tian couldn't help but grin as he muttered to himself. He wondered what Qi Yefeng's expression would be when he heard the discussions of the crowd. Red Moon Divine Palace had indeed been too weak for hundreds of years. This time, it was almost certain that they would be removed. However, this was before Nye Tian and the others arrived. Now that Nye Tian had joined Red Moon Divine Palace, there was undoubtedly a huge change. Big brother Nye Tian, what are these people talking about? Why do they want to divide Red Moon Land? Ed listened to the discussion of the crowd and frowned in confusion. It's just a bunch of idiots talking nonsense. Nye Tian smiled faintly, not minding it at all. He suddenly thought of something. Although he couldn't participate in the Heavenly Emperor Realm competition of the 12 Shrine Palaces, Ed could. If Ed were to participate in the Celestial Emperor competition, he would definitely be the champion. Although Ed was much weaker than Nye Tian now, he was definitely stronger than Nye Tian when he was a Heavenly Emperor. Letting him participate in the Heavenly Emperor competition was absolutely foolproof. When he thought of this, Nye Tian couldn't help but glance at Ed. Of course, he wouldn't force the latter. Whether the latter was willing to participate in the Divine Palace Grand Competition was entirely up to him. I wonder how strong Brother Rushi, Brother Mo and Brother Jiu are now. Nye Tian suddenly thought of Mo Rushi and company and his eyes flickered. Without wasting any more time, he quickened his pace and headed towards Nine Heaven City. The grand competition of the 12 Shrine was arranged in the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. This way, it saved Nye Tian some time, which made him very happy. Boom. However, at that moment, a powerful wave of air suddenly came crashing down from the sky, crashing down towards the ground. Huh! Nyetian frowned and his eyes trembled slightly. He looked up to the sky and saw a huge two-headed monster bird that was 1,000 meters long swooping down towards the ground. It's the two-headed golden roc. The people below looked up and saw the two-headed monster. They couldn't help but exclaim and dodge. Nyetian's face darkened, but he immediately reacted. He flapped his wings and swept Cher and Ed up. His figure flashed and retreated thousands of meters away. Rumble! The two-headed golden roc swooped down and spread its huge dark golden wings. It covered the sky and stirred up a cloud of dust. The trees and rocks within tens of thousands of meters were directly crushed, and two huge ravines that were dozens of meters deep appeared on the ground. What a terrifying monster bird! Its aura is so strong. When Nyetian saw this scene, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. Fortunately, he dodged quickly, otherwise he would be in a difficult situation. The two-headed golden roc should be a divine beast. Its aura was much stronger than the 9th-rank spiritual beasts in the plane world. It was comparable to an intermediate deity. Just as the two-headed golden roc's huge body was about to touch the ground, its wings suddenly flapped, stirring up a strong hurricane. Its body directly shot up into the sky, leaving a trail of dust behind. On the ground, a wave of dust that was dozens of meters high was raised, rolling and spreading. Nyetian frowned. He released all his sword aura and forcibly broke through the dust wave. Damn it! He looked up at the two-headed golden roc that was about to disappear into the sky. His face darkened. It was obvious that the person on top of the two-headed golden roc was showing off and provoking the crowd. Isn't it just a two-headed crow? What's so great about it? Ed patted the dirt off his body and said impatiently. The two-headed golden roc was dark golden all over. From afar, it looked black and shiny. That was why Ed said it was a two-headed crow. Ignore them. Let's go. Nyetian shook his head. He couldn't be bothered with these people. However, the discussions of the people around him caught his attention. Two-headed golden roc. Don't tell me these people are from the cloud-splitting divine palace? Of course they are. The cloud-splitting divine palace is worthy of being the leader of the 12 shrines. Their disciples all ride the two-headed golden roc to participate in the competition. The people from the cloud-splitting divine palace are too arrogant. Isn't it just riding the two-headed golden roc? What's so great about it? They are arrogant because they have the right to be so. If nothing unexpected happens, the cloud-splitting divine palace will take the first place in the grand competition of the 12 shrine. That's right. I heard that the cloud-shattering divine palace has a peerless genius. Although she is only 200 years old, she already possesses strength at the peak of the low god stage. Moreover, she's a woman. It is said that she possesses one of the 4 great ancient forbidden bodies, the 1,000 Clouds dark body. Her true battle prowess is enough to instantly kill an ordinary mid-god expert. 1,000 Cloud dark body. Upon hearing these words, Nyetian couldn't help but frown. His expression changed slightly. Although he didn't know what the 1,000 Cloud dark body was, since it was listed as one of the 4 great ancient forbidden bodies along with the body of desolation, it must be extremely terrifying. Moreover, the person who possessed the 1,000 Cloud dark body was also a woman. Nyetian couldn't help but wonder if the 4 great ancient forbidden bodies could only be possessed by female martial artists. Brother, do you know the name of the person who possesses the 1,000 Cloud dark body? Nyetian couldn't contain his curiosity. He took a step forward and asked. The person cast a glance at Nyetian and seemed a little impatient. However, he still said, I think she is called Xian or something. I heard that she is a martial artist who came from the lower planes. She is really too terrifying. Luo Xian. Nyetian was stunned for a moment. Then, a name blurted out from his mouth. Yes. Her name is Luoxian. The person nodded his head repeatedly and said, This Luoxian is incredible. Not only is her talent in martial arts heaven-defying, but she is also devastatingly beautiful. I heard that countless geniuses in the God Realm world regard her as the most beautiful woman. The most beautiful woman? It would be great if I could marry a woman like her. Don't let your imagination run wild. If the people from the cloud-splitting divine palace heard you, they would skin you alive. The surrounding people discussed among themselves. However, Nye Tian couldn't hear what they were saying. When he confirmed that the person these people were talking about was Luoxian, a loud bang went off in his head. The blood in his body started to surge. He had never imagined that Luoxian would actually join the cloud-splitting divine palace, the leader of the 12 divine palaces. Moreover, she had even awakened one of the 4 great ancient forbidden bodies, the 1,000-cloud dark body.